So hey guys, this is your favorite fictional vortex. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto was the legendary sage king who united two queens Naruto. OX Rias Gremory x Sona Sitri, High School DxD. But before we start, remember to subscribe and like this video. Now let's start. Chapter 1. An Echo in the Static. The night air over Kuo-T-On was a tapestry woven from unseen threads of power, a delicate ecosystem of energies perceptible only to those attuned to its hum. For the creatures of the dark who called this place their territory, the world was never silent. It was a constant, low-level symphony of competing vibrations. The demonic energy of the Gremory and Sitri clans felt like a deep, resonant bass note, a steady thrum of ancient lineage and established dominion that pulsed from the opulent grounds of Kuo Academy. It was a warm, possessive pressure, tasting of aged wine and smoldering embers, a declaration of ownership that permeated the soil and coiled around the streetlights. Layered over this was the sharper, more volatile energy of the fallen angels who occasionally flitted through the town's periphery. Their presence was like the discordant scrape of a cello string, a scent of ozone and scorched feathers that promised a sudden, violent storm. It was a transient energy, full of bitter pride and simmering resentment. Clinging to the highest spires of the city, the church steeples and radio towers, places that looked down upon the world they felt had forsaken them. And beneath it all, rarer but more distinct, was the quiet, almost desperate chime of sacred gears. These were unpredictable sparks of holy light trapped in mortal shells, each one a unique melody. The nascent, unawakened ones were faint, like the gentle tinkle of wind chimes in a distant room, full of unrealized potential. The more active ones, like the one belonging to the perverted but surprisingly potent Issei Hyodo, were a rising crescendo of emerald light. A beat of raw, untamed power that pulsed with the frantic rhythm of a human heart. The devils felt these energies as pressure and heat. The fallen angels tasted them as ambition and opportunity. To the few exorcists who passed through, they were a cacophony of heresy that needed to be silenced. This was the static of Kuo Town, the background noise of a secret war fought in the twilight hours. It was known, it was mapped, it was the established reality. Until tonight. Tonight, something new had appeared. It was not a sound, but a silence. It was not a pressure, but a vacuum. In the very heart of the Gremory Sitri territory, a phenomenon had manifested that defied every known law of supernatural physics. It was a perfect void, a sphere of absolute null energy. Hat was not merely empty but seemed to actively consume the ambient energies around it. Demonic power that drifted too close was not repelled or contested, it simply ceased to be, like a river flowing into a bottomless chasm. The sharp tang of a fallen scout's probe vanished without a trace. The gentle hum of a nearby dormant sacred gear was swallowed by an utter, profound silence. This was not an absence of presence. It was the presence of an absence. An echo in reverse, a hole in the world. Inside the lavishly decorated club room of the Occult Research Club, a crimson magic circle on the floor pulsed with a soft, ambient light, casting long shadows across the velvet curtains and polished mahogany furniture. Rias Gremory, her fiery red hair a stark contrast to the room's dim lighting, sat behind her ornate desk. A delicate hand supporting her chin. Her usually placid, confident expression was marred by a subtle frown of concentration. She was the heir to the Gremory clan, one of the highest-ranking devils in the underworld. Her senses were a finely tuned instrument, capable of discerning the slightest shift in her domain. What she felt now was not a shift, but a fundamental error. "Akeno," she said, her voice smooth but laced with an uncharacteristic edge of concern. "Report. What do you feel?" Akeno Himahima, Rias's queen and second in command, stood by the window, her long black hair tied in its signature ponytail. A faint smile played on her lips, the default mask she wore to hide the storm within, but her violet eyes betrayed a deep, primal unease. The air around her, which usually crackled with a subtle static of holy lightning, was still and inert. "It's quiet, Rias," Akeno replied, her voice a sultry purr that failed to conceal her confusion. "Too quiet. It's like a patch of the world has been muted. I can feel the town, the school, our territory lines, and then there is a patch of nothing. It's not shielded. A shield has a texture, a presence of its own. This is simply gone." She shivered, a rare and telling gesture. It makes my skin crawl. It feels hungry. Across the room, Yuto Kiba, the handsome knight of the peerage, had his hand resting on the pommel of an unseen sword. His senses, tuned to speed and the flow of energy in combat, were equally disoriented. It's like trying to look at a blind spot. I can feel the edges of it, but my senses just slide off the center. There's no purchase. I can't even gauge its distance or size accurately. In a corner, curled up on a plush sofa, Kaneko Tuju, the petite rook, sat perfectly still. Her usual state was one of quiet observation. But this was different. Her feline senses, which perceived the world as a complex web of life force and energy flows, were completely overwhelmed. She was staring intently at the wall, as if she could see through it to the source of the disturbance. Her golden eyes were wide, not with fear, but with a profound, instinctual caution, like a cat that had just seen a hole open in the fabric of reality itself. It's empty, she whispered, her voice barely audible. But the emptiness is heavy. Rias closed her eyes, focusing her own immense demonic power, the power of destruction. She reached out, extending her senses toward the anomaly. Usually, her power would meet a target and she could gauge its strength, its nature, its intent. This time, her probing tendril of energy simply vanished. There was no resistance, no feedback, no sign of its annihilation. It was just gone, erased from existence as if she had never sent it at all. A cold knot formed in her stomach. Anything that could so effortlessly negate the power of a Gremory was not just a threat, it was an impossibility. Stay on high alert, she commanded, her voice regaining its authority. I want to know what this is. I want to know who this is. Find it. At that same moment, in the stark, modern office of the Student Council President, a similar scene was playing out, albeit with a far more analytical tone. Sona Sitri, her short black hair and intelligent eyes framed by stylish glasses, stared at a complex, three-dimensional magical projection hovering over her desk. The projectio N was a detailed map of Kuo Academy and the surrounding town, crisscrossed with lines of shimmering blue data representing energy flows, ley lines, and territorial boundaries. And in the center of TH, a meticulously ordered grid was a jagged, flickering black hole of corrupted data. Tsubaki, run the diagnostic again, Sona ordered, her voice crisp and devoid of emotion. Her fingers tapped a rapid, precise rhythm on her desk. Cross-reference all known shielding spells, stealth enchantments, and dimensional phasing abilities. Tsubaki Shinra, her stoic, black-haired queen, stood beside her, her gaze fixed on the anomaly. I've run it 3 times, President. The results are the same. All telemetry that enters the affected zone simply ceases to report. It's not being jammed. The signal itself is being deconstructed. The system flags it as a critical data void. It's as if the laws of magic are being suspended in that specific location. Saji Genshiro, Sona's pawn, fidgeted nervously by the door. Is it an enemy? Maybe a new fallen angel with a weird sacred gear. Sona shook her head, pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose. Unlikely. This is too clean, too absolute. A sacred gear, no matter how powerful, is a system. It has rules. It has an energy signature, even if it's designed to mask it. This has no signature. It is the absence of a signature. It is a logical contradiction. And, she zoomed in the map. Her eyes narrowing, it appears to be mobile. Its last known coordinates place it directly en route to Kuo Academy. It will be here tomorrow morning. She leaned back in her chair, a thoughtful, calculating expression on her face. Rias Gremory would see this as a challenge to her power, a threat to be confronted and dominated. Sona Sitri saw it as something far more dangerous, an unknown variable, a piece that did not belong on the chessboard, an element that did not follow the rules of the game. And in her world of strategy and logic, nothing was more terrifying than a problem for which you had no data. Tomorrow, she murmured to herself. We will observe. We will gather information. We will not engage until we understand the nature of this equation. The next day, the anomaly was given a name, Naruto Uzumaki. He was a new transfer student, assigned to Issei Hyodo's class. His appearance was deceptively simple. He was tall, with a lean but powerful build that was evident even through the standard Kuo Academy uniform. His hair was a bright, sun blonde, and his eyes were a startlingly deep blue. He carried no bag, no books, nothing but himself. His expression was one of calm, detached neutrality. When he was introduced to the class, he gave a short, polite bow and a simple, "Naruto Uzumaki." "A pleasure." His voice was a smooth baritone, calm and even. Yet it carried an odd resonance that made the hairs on the back of everyone's neck stand up for a moment before settling. To the human students, he was just another handsome, mysterious transfer. To the supernatural population, he was the walking, breathing void that had shaken them the night before. Standing in the middle of the classroom, surrounded by the faint energies of Issei and a few other dormant gear users. He was a black hole of sensory input. Rias's peerage, scattered throughout the school, felt it immediately. Kaneko, 2 floors below, flinched as if from a sudden pressure change. Kiba, walking down the hallway, felt a cold draft in the middle of a warm, sunlit corridor. Akano, on the roof, simply closed her eyes and sighed, a flicker of something that was EQ. UAL parts fear and fascination dancing in her gaze. The observation began. It was, for all intents and purposes, a complete failure. Sona's network of student council members, the most efficient intelligence gathering force in the school, reported nothing of value. Uzumaki attended his classes. He listened. When called upon by a history teacher to discuss the strategic implications of the Sengoku period, he delivered a terrifyingly concise and insightful analysis that suggested a level of understanding far beyond any textbook. He spoke of battlefield logistics, psychological warfare, and political maneuvering with the casual authority of someone who had been there. The teacher was left speechless. During lunch, Saji Genshiro was tasked with tailing him. Naruto bought a simple lunch from the cafeteria, found a quiet bench under a large ginkgo tree, and ate. Saji tried to get closer, to listen in, to feel his energy, but was thwarted by a series of perfectly mundane and infuriatingly effective coincidences. A group of girls suddenly stopped in front of him to gossip, blocking his path. A soccer ball, kicked from halfway across the field, bounced off a trash can and hit him squarely in the back of the head. When his vision cleared, Naruto's bench was empty. Rias's attempts were met with a similar, almost insulting, level of casual dismissal. She sent Yuto Kiba, her knight whose speed bordered on teleportation, to follow Naruto after school. Kiba was a phantom, a whisper in the crowd. He kept a perfect distance, shadowing Naruto as he left the school grounds. Naruto walked at a steady, unhurried pace. He turned a corner onto a busy shopping street. Kiba, a mere 5 seconds behind him, rounded the same corner. Naruto was gone. It was impossible. The street was a straight line for 100 meters in either direction. There were no alleys, no side doors, no open windows. The crowd was thick, but not so thick that a man with bright blonde hair could simply vanish into it. Kiba stood there, his swordsman's senses screaming at him that something was fundamentally wrong. It wasn't that Naruto had used a burst of speed or a teleportation circle. It was as if for the second Kiba's line of sight had been broken by the corner of the building. The universe had rewritten itself, and in the new version, Naruto was no longer on that street. It was a subtle, profound violation of reality that left the normally unflappable knight feeling deeply unnerved. Next, Kaneko was dispatched. Her stealth was unmatched. She moved through shadows, her presence so diminished she was little more than a ghost. She was to observe his apartment from a rooftop across the street. She found the location from his school records and settled in, her senses extended. She felt the normal energies of a residential building. The low hum of electricity, the faint life forces of the human inhabitants. But the apartment listed as Naruto Uzumaki's was a sensory vacuum. It was the void, now contained within 4 walls. She focused, trying to perceive anything within that space. What she got back was a feeling. It wasn't a hostile presence, or a powerful one. It was a sense of immense, ancient stillness. A silence that was not empty, but full. It was the silence of a deep forest at midnight, the silence of the bottom of the ocean, the silence of a dead galaxy between the stars. It was a peace so absolute and profound that it was terrifying. Her instincts, honed by the trauma of her past and her Nekomata heritage, screamed at her. Not of danger, but of irrelevance. It was the feeling a single ant might have while contemplating the sheer, unthinking vastness of the sky. She retreated, not because she was discovered, but because she felt that to continue looking would be to lose herself in that endless, silent expanse. That evening, the Occult Research Club was thick with tension. "He knows," Kiba stated, pacing the floor. "He has to know we're watching him. No one is that lucky. And no one just disappears from a straight road. He is a master of stealth." Then, Rias mused, though her tone suggested she didn't believe it was that simple. "No," Kaneko said, her voice firm. "He doesn't hide. He is just not there." Akeno giggled, a sound that was slightly more strained than usual. Era, it seems we have a genuine mystery on our hands. A man who can't be sensed, can't be followed, and can't be seen unless he wants to be. It's almost romantic, don't you think?" Rias ignored her queen's teasing. Her mind was racing. Was he a new faction? A rogue god? Some forgotten creature from the dawn of time? Every theory she concocted fell apart when measured against the sheer, passive nature of his power. He did nothing, yet he warped the world around him. He showed no hostility, yet his very presence was a challenge to her authority. It was then that her enchanted cell phone buzzed, a special frequency reserved for alerts from her network of familiars. Her eyes narrowed. A stray devil, a low-level one, a former wizard who had made a pact and then killed his master, had been tracked to the abandoned warehouse district on the edge of town. It was a routine cleanup. But tonight, nothing felt routine. "All right, everyone," Rias said, standing up, a crimson aura flaring to life around her. "Mission time. This is the perfect opportunity. We will deal with the stray, and we will see if our mysterious new student reacts to a major supernatural event in his vicinity. I want to see what he does when the quiet of this town is broken." The teleportation circle flared to life, and in a rush of wind and demonic power, the orc vanished from their clubroom. The warehouse district was a graveyard of industry. Rusting steel skeletons loomed against the bruised purple of the twilight sky. The air was thick with the smell of decay, stagnant water, and the sharp, coppery tang of spilled blood that had long since dried. In the center of a cavernous, derelict factory, the stray devil cackled. Its form a grotesque parody of its former humanity. Its limbs were elongated, its skin was a mottled gray, and its eyes glowed with a malevolent, insane light. It had just finished devouring a homeless man who had been sheltering in the building, and the floor was slick with gore. A brilliant crimson light erupted in the middle of the warehouse, and the Gremory peerage stepped through. Their expressions grim and battle-ready. Kiba's hand was a blur as he summoned a demonic sword. Akeno's fingers crackled with yellow lightning. Kaneko's small fists clenched, radiating an aura of immense physical power. Rias stood at the forefront, her red hair billowing in an unfelt wind, the power of destruction gathering in her hands like a miniature black sun. The stray hissed, its madness giving way to a flicker of terror as it recognized the Gremory crest. "The princess, here for little old me. I'm flattered," it shrieked, preparing to launch a volley of corrosive magical bolts. But it never got the chance. Before Rias could give the order to attack, before a single member of her peerage could move, something changed. The air in the warehouse grew heavy, dense, as if the pressure had suddenly dropped. A profound silence fell, swallowing the stray's maniacal laughter and the crackle of Akeno's lightning. It was the same silence they had felt from Naruto, but this time it was not passive. It was active. It was a weapon. The stray devil froze, its eyes wide. The demonic energy it was gathering in its palm sputtered and died. Its grotesque form began to tremble, not from fear, but as if its very structure was becoming unstable. It looked down at its hands, which were starting to dissolve into faint motes of red and black light, like embers from a dying fire. What is this?" it stammered, its voice losing its cohesion. "My power. My body. It's unraveling." The Gremory peerage could only watch, stunned into inaction. They felt no attack. There was no spell casting. No surge of power from an enemy. There was only the oppressive, absolute silence and the sight of the stray devil being systematically deconstructed by an unseen force. Its screams became digitized gurgles as its throat disintegrated. Its limbs crumbled away, not burning or exploding, but simply ceasing to be, its component energies returning to the ambient static of the world. Within 10 seconds, all that was left was a fading cloud of particles that drifted away on a draft, and the gruesome scene of its last meal. The stray devil was gone, not defeated, but erased. Akano was the first to recover, her senses sweeping the cavernous space. Up there, she gasped. Everyone's gaze snapped upwards, towards the high, shadowed rafters near the ceiling. For a moment, they saw nothing but darkness and rusting steel beams. Then, a figure stepped out from behind a large support pillar, moving from a shadow so deep it should not have been able to conceal him. It was Naruto Uzumaki. He was standing on a narrow beam 100 feet above them, his balance perfect, his school uniform utterly unruffled. He looked down at them, his expression as neutral and unreadable as it had been all day. He slowly lowered his right hand, which had been held out in front of him, palm forward. As he did, they saw it. On the back of his hand, an intricate, silvery pattern of light was glowing softly. It was not a demonic magic circle or a holy sigil. It looked like a fusion of a hyper-complex circuit board, a celestial star chart, and an ancient, forgotten alphabet. As they watched, the light of the rune dimmed, flickered once, and then faded completely into his skin, leaving no trace. He had been the source. He had been the one to unleash that terrifying, silent power. Rias stared up at him, a whirlwind of emotion swirling within her. Shock, outrage at his interference in her territory, a healthy dose of fear, and an overwhelming, burning curiosity. Who was he? What was he? How could he wield a power that could erase a being from existence with no apparent effort? Their eyes met across the vast, dark space. His blue gaze was unnervingly clear, holding no malice, no pride, no judgment. It was the gaze of an ancient being looking upon a group of interesting but ultimately non-threatening children. He held her stare for a long, silent moment, a moment in which an entire conversation of challenge and acknowledgement seemed to pass between them. Then, he gave a minuscule, almost imperceptible nod. It was not a sign of respect or submission, but one of simple confirmation. Yes, it was me. Now you know. He then did the most impossible thing of all. He took a single step backward, into the deepest part of the shadow cast by the warehouse's roof. And he was gone. He did not teleport. He did not move with incredible speed. The shadow did not swallow him. He was simply there one moment, and the next, the space he had occupied was empty. The void had withdrawn. The Gremory peerage stood in stunned silence for a full minute, the only sound the dripping of water from a leaky pipe. The sheer, casual impossibility of what they had just witnessed was more impactful than any grand display of power could ever have been. Later that night, the wind was cold and sharp atop the main clock tower of Kuo Academy. It whipped Rias Gremory's long red hair across her face as he stared out at the glittering lights of the town, her town. But the feeling of ownership felt fragile now, contested by a force she could not comprehend. The soft whisper of a blue magic circle forming behind her did not make her turn. She knew who it was. Sona Sitri stepped out of the portal, her student council uniform immaculate, her expression as stern and serious as ever. Gremory, Sona said, her voice cutting through the wind. The energy signature of the stray devil vanished abruptly. My sensors detected a momentary, focused spike of the same data void we observed last night, originating from the warehouse district. Report. Rias finally turned, her crimson eyes meeting Sona's violet ones. The usual games of political maneuvering and subtle insults were absent from their gazes. Tonight, they were not rivals. They were two rulers who had just discovered that a dragon had made its nest in their shared backyard. He was there, Sitri, Rias said, her voice low and heavy. Naruto Uzumaki. He erased it. He didn't fight it. He unmade it. Then he vanished. Sona's analytical mind processed the information. Erased. Unmade. These were not combat terms. They were conceptual, philosophical, and utterly terrifying. I see, she said, her voice tight. The unknown variable has finally acted. It appears the game has changed. Rias turned back to look at the town, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. It hasn't changed, she replied, a dangerous glint in her eyes. It's been thrown off the board entirely. We are no longer dealing with a new player, Sona. She paused, letting the full weight of their new reality settle over them. We're dealing with something that might just own the board. Chapter 1 end. Chapter 2. The logic of the void. Information was power. This was the first and most inviolable tenet of Sona Sitri's existence. Power was not the brutish application of force, as Rias Gremory so often seemed to believe. That was merely a tool, a crude instrument for achieving a desired outcome. True power lay in the accumulation and application of data. It was the ability to know your enemy's weaknesses before they knew them themselves, to predict their movements. To shape the battlefield so that the outcome was decided long before the first blow was ever struck. Power was control. It was order. It was logic. The events at the warehouse had presented Sona with a catastrophic data failure. The subject, Naruto Uzumaki, had acted. He had produced a result, the erasure of a stray devil. But the process, the methodology, the energy expenditure, all the crucial data points that would allow her to categorize and understand him, were completely absent. It was an impossible equation, an effect with no discernible cause. Her peerage's surveillance reports were equally useless. A collection of frustrating anomalies and impossible disappearances. He was a walking logical fallacy, a ghost in the machine of her perfectly ordered world. Rias would respond to this with confrontation. She would demand answers, posture, and likely provoke a conflict she was ill-equipped to handle. It was her nature, all fire and passion, a direct assault from a predictable vector. Sona, however, knew that to challenge a being of unknown capability on a physical level was not strategy, it was suicide. One did not test the depth of a chasm by jumping into it. One dropped a stone and listened for the echo. Her stone would not be a magical attack or a physical challenge. It would be a game. Go. The oldest and most complex strategic game ever devised by humanity. A simple board, 19x19 lines, with stones of black and white. But within that simplicity lay a universe of possibility, a system of such staggering complexity that it mirrored the ebb and flow of empires, the grand strategies of war, and the intricate dance of life and death. A person's true nature, their intellect, their patience, their aggression, their foresight, it was all laid bare on the Go board. It was a perfect diagnostic tool. She would not challenge his power. She would dissect his mind. The invitation was delivered formally by Tsubaki Shinra at the end of the school day. A simple, polite request for Mr. Uzumaki to meet with the student council president for a brief discussion regarding his transfer. Naruto accepted with that same infuriatingly calm nod, his blue eyes betraying nothing. As he made his way to the student council room, Rias Gremory's parallel attempt at surveillance unfolded with a quiet, mundane absurdity. She had tasked Kiba and Kaneko with a joint tailing mission, Belly. Having their combined skills would be impossible to evade. Kiba was to shadow him from a distance, using his supernatural speed to stay out of sight, while Kaneko would use her stealth to get close, to try and catch a whisper of his thoughts or a flicker of his aura. The attempt was a farce. As Naruto walked down a moderately crowded school corridor, a first-year student suddenly tripped, sending a precarious stack of books flying. Kiba, moving to avoid the paper blizzard, was forced to check his speed, his momentum broken. In that single moment of distraction, 3 members of the Kendo Club, deep in a heated argument about a recent match, walked directly into his path, their bamboo shinai forming an impromptu, impassable barrier. By the time he navigated the mundane chaos, the corridor was empty. The entire sequence of events had lasted no more than 3 seconds. Kaneko's experience was even more surreal. She had chosen a path through the less traveled parts of the school, planning to intercept Naruto near the council room. She moved like a phantom through the empty art classrooms and forgotten storage areas. She reached the final service hallway that ran behind the council offices. A guaranteed route to her destination, only to find her way blocked. A large, heavy-duty cleaning cart, the kind used for stripping and waxing the floors, was parked directly in the middle of the narrow passage. Wedged from wall to wall, a sign hanging from it read, in bold red letters, "Wet wax, do not enter." There was no one around. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish. There was no logical reason for the cart to be there. She could have easily climbed over it, but the sheer, blatant improbability of the obstacle gave her pause. It felt less like a coincidence and more like a statement. This path is closed to you. Defeated by a janitorial implement, she retreated into the shadows, a profound sense of futility washing over her. The student council room was a temple of order. The air was cool and smelled of clean paper and sterilized wood. Everything was arranged at perfect right angles. the stacks of files, the chairs, the meticulously organized bookshelves. The late afternoon sun was beginning to set, but the heavy rain that had started an hour ago streaked down the large panoramic window, turning the outside world into a blurry, gray watercolor. The only sounds were the rhythmic drumming of the rain and the quiet, almost imperceptible hum of the room's climate control. Sona sat on one side of a low table, upon which rested a magnificent Go board. The Gobin was carved from a solid piece of kaya wood, its surface polished to a soft golden sheen, the grid lines inked in precise, black lacquer. Two covered bowls, one of slate for the black stones and one of clamshell for the white, sat beside it. She looked up as Naruto entered, Tsubaki holding the door for him and then closing it with a soft, decisive click, leaving them alone. Naruto's gaze swept the room once, taking in every detail with a placid, observational air. He then looked at the Go board, and for the first time, Sona saw a flicker of something in his eyes. It wasn't excitement or surprise. It was a faint, ancient sense of nostalgia. Like a mountain remembering it was once molten rock. Sitri Kaichu, he said, his voice as calm as the surface of a deep lake. I was told this was about my transfer. It is, Sona replied. Her voice crisp. She gestured to the cushion opposite her. A student's character and aptitude are important for their smooth integration into our academy. I find this to be a far more efficient method of evaluation than standardized testing. Please, have a seat. He didn't question her. He simply moved with a fluid, silent grace and settled onto the cushion, his posture perfectly straight. His presence filling the space opposite her with a weight that seemed to absorb the very light in the room. I will take black, Sona stated, uncovering the slate bowl. It was her right as the one who issued the challenge. She picked up a stone, its surface cool and smooth against her fingertips, and with a sharp, confident click, placed it on the board. The opening move, a standard one, in the upper right corner, staking a claim, establishing a foundation. Naruto said nothing. He uncovered the white clamshell bowl, the stones within glowing with a soft, pearlescent light. He picked one up, holding it delicately between his index and middle fingers. His movements were unhurried, deliberate. He placed his stone near the center of the board. The star point, Tengen, an unconventional, almost arrogant opening, a move that aimed for influence over the entire board at the cost of early territorial security. It was a move a grandmaster might make against a novice, or a fool might make against anyone. Sona's eyes narrowed slightly, an attempt to intimidate, or a genuine lack of understanding of fundamental strategy. She responded with cool precision, building a secure formation in the corner. Her moves following the established patterns of Joseki, time-tested sequences that were mathematically proven to be efficient. Her play style was a reflection of her mind, logical, aggressive, seeking to build a fortress of territory from which she could launch her attacks. Naruto's responses were bizarre. For every logical, textbook move she made, he would place a stone in a seemingly unrelated part of the board. He ignored her invasions, sacrificed small groups of his stones for no discernible gain, and created weak, inefficient shapes that any amateur would have avoided. Sona's internal monologue was a whirlwind of analysis and growing disbelief. He's not protecting his groups. That cluster on the left is dead. He's just thrown away 15 points. Why? Is it a probe? Is he testing my ability to read the board? No, that's illogical. There is no hidden meaning here. It is simply a bad move. She pressed her advantage, her black stones flowing across the board like an invading army, capturing his isolated, scattered white stones, walling off vast swaths of territory. The game was becoming a slaughter. On the surface, she was winning by an insurmountable margin. But the feeling of victory was absent. Instead, a cold, creeping unease was beginning to settle in her stomach. The rhythm of the game was hypnotic. The sharp click of her slate stones, followed by the softer, more resonant thud of his clamshell. The relentless drumming of the rain against the glass. The utter silence from her opponent. He did not seem frustrated by his losses. He did no. She seemed concerned by her massive territorial lead. He just kept placing his stones with the same calm, unhurried deliberation, his blue eyes occasionally glancing up to meet hers, his gaze as deep and unreadable as the night sky. He's not playing me, the thought suddenly struck her, so jarring that her hand paused on its way to the bowl. He's not trying to win. This isn't a battle. It's a construction. Her eyes, trained to see patterns of life and death in small, localized skirmishes, suddenly pulled back. She forced herself to ignore the territories, the captured stones, the immediate tactical situation. She looked at the board as a whole, as a single, unified image. And what she saw made the air freeze in her lungs. His white stones, the scattered, sacrificed, seemingly random placements across the entire 19x19 grid. They were not random at all. They were points on a schematic. The weak, inefficient shapes he had created were not mistakes, they were components. The groups he had allowed her to capture were not losses. They were negative space, deliberately created voids that defined the shape of a larger structure. He hadn't been playing Go. He had been using the grid of the board. D as a canvas and her own black stones as a contrasting medium. He had used her own logical, aggressive, territory-building strategy against her, guiding her moves, baiting her into creating the very lines he needed to complete his design. It was a rune, a vast, impossibly complex rune, spread across the entire surface of the board. It was a pattern of such geometric and esoteric intricacy that it made the most complex magical circles of the underworld look like a child's scribbles. And she, Sona Sitri, the greatest young strategist of her generation, had been his unwitting assistant in its creation. Her mind, her pride, her entire logical framework, shattered. The humiliation was a physical blow, followed immediately by a wave of profound, intellectual terror. What kind of mind could operate on this level? To not only play a perfect game of Go backwards, but to use the game itself as a tool for a purpose so far beyond its scope that it was sacrilege. She looked up at him, her composure finally breaking. Her eyes wide with dawning horror. He met her gaze, and for the first time, she saw a hint of an expression on his face. It was not triumph. It was not arrogance. It was a look of serene, almost melancholic understanding. A teacher looking at a student who has finally begun to grasp the true scale of the lesson. You have one move left, Kaichu, he said, his voice quiet, almost gentle. Her eyes dropped back to the board. There was only 1 point left to play, the final, central intersection. It was the heart of the rune, the nexus of the entire pattern. Her turn. He had designed it this way. The final act, the completion of his work, was hers to perform. Her hand trembled as she reached for a black stone. The piece of slate felt impossibly heavy. This was no longer a game. It was a ritual, and she was being compelled to complete it. With a final, shuddering breath, she placed the black stone on the central point. The click of the stone settling onto the wood was the last normal sound in the room. For a single, silent heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, the air grew instantly, painfully cold, the moisture in the room crystallizing into frost on the windowpane. The soft, ambient light from the overhead fixtures flickered and died, plunging the room into a deep twilight, illuminated only by a terrifying new source. The white stones on the Go board. They were glowing, each one a miniature star burning with a cold, silver light. The black lines of the grid itself seemed to warp and bend, the 361 intersections becoming vertices in a multi-dimensional construct. The rune that Naruto had built was no longer a pattern on a flat surface, it was a living piece of cosmic architecture, a gateway. The walls of the student council room did not disappear. They dissolved. One moment, Sona was looking at a bookshelf filled with neatly arranged files. The next, she was staring into an infinite, silent abyss. The room was gone, the school was gone, the world was gone. She was sitting on a floating, disembodied patch of floor, opposite Naruto, in the middle of a silent, star-strewn cosmos. Nebulae of vibrant, impossible colors swirled in the distance, their light moving in slow, languid rivers. Galaxies, dense clusters of ancient light, hung in the void like jewels on black velvet. A colossal, dead star, its surface a fractured crystalline shell, drifted slowly past them. So close she could see the eons of cold etched into its surface. There was no sound. No up or down, only the profound, crushing, and terrifyingly beautiful emptiness between worlds. It was the void she had sensed. The stillness Kaneko had felt, given form. She felt like a single bacterium looking at a photograph of the entire universe. Her ambitions, her politics, her power, her vir. Why existence? It was all reduced to an insignificant, momentary speck of dust in the face of this silent, eternal grandeur. Naruto sat opposite her, completely unaffected. This place, this horrifying, magnificent void, was his natural state. He was not a visitor here. He was a part of it. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the vision vanished. The cold receded, the silver light from the ghost stones faded, and the familiar, sterile walls of the student council room solidified back into reality. The overhead lights flickered back on. The sound of the rain returned, a comforting, mundane anchor to the world she knew. She was left gasping, her heart hammering against her ribs, her mind reeling from the sheer sensory and conceptual overload. Naruto stood up, his movements still fluid and unhurried. He gave a slight, formal bow. "Thank you for the game, Sitri Kaichu," he said, his voice once again a calm, even baritone. It was most illuminating. "I trust my evaluation is complete." He turned and walked to the door, leaving her alone in the silent, orderly room. She stared at the Go board. It was just a board again. A piece of polished wood with black and white stones arranged in a complex pattern. A record of a game. A monument to her utter and absolute defeat, a defeat on a scale she had never imagined possible. She had wanted to dissect his mind, to understand the logic of the void. Instead, the void had shown her a glimpse of its own logic. And she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the soul, that she would spend the rest of her life trying, and failing, to comprehend it. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. Scars of a Fallen Feather. Dusk bled across the sky in hues of violet and bruised orange, a melancholic farewell to a day that had been, for Issei Hyodo, the single greatest day of his young, perverted life. He was on a date. With a girl. A beautiful, kind, utterly perfect girl named Yuma Amano. He walked beside her, his heart a frantic drum solo against his ribs, his mind a chaotic maelstrom of disbelief and triumphant, lecherous joy. He was so caught up in the fantasy that he failed to notice the subtle shift in the world around him. He didn't see the way the shadows seemed to deepen and stretch, clinging to the edges of his vision. He didn't feel the air grow heavy and still, the usual city sounds of traffic and life fading into a muted, expectant hum. EY were approaching the town's central fountain, its waters catching the last of the fading light. Issei, working up the courage to perhaps, maybe, possibly hold her hand, was rehearsing his lines in his head. It was then that Yuma stopped. "Issei-kun," she said, her voice, which had been so sweet all day, now held a chilling, unfamiliar edge. "Would you do something for me? Anything, Yuma-chan, anything at all," he blurted out, his brain short-circuiting with eagerness. Her smile was a predatory slash in the deepening gloom. "Would you die for me?" The transformation was horrific. The Tle girl he had spent the day with dissolved in a flurry of black feathers and malevolent energy. In her place stood a woman of stunning, cruel beauty. Scant black leather straps did little to cover her voluptuous figure, and massive, midnight black wings unfurled from her back, casting a monstrous shadow that swallowed the fountain whole. This was the fallen angel, Rainer. From a rooftop several blocks away, the Occult Research Club watched through a magical scrying portal. Rias Gremory's expression was one of cold calculation. "She's made her move," she stated. "Kiba, Kaneko, be ready to secure the perimeter. Akano, prepare a diversionary lightning strike to mask our teleportation circle. We move in the moment his life signs cease. It must be a clean death for the resurrection to take hold with minimal complications." It was the standard, if morally gray, recruitment strategy. Allow the target with a powerful sacred gear to be killed by an enemy, then use the opening created by their death to resurrect them as a devil, binding them to a new life and a new master. It was a necessary evil, a regrettable but effective way to bolster one's forces. Issei Hyodo, with his twice critical boosted gear, was too valuable an asset to leave on the board as a human. Akano watched the scene unfold, a familiar, sadistically cheerful smile playing on her lips. Era, how tragic. To have your first date end in your own murder. I almost feel sorry for him. Yet, beneath the practiced facade, a part of her, the part that remembered the sting of betrayal and the agony of a torn heritage, felt a sliver of genuine pity. To have hope so brutally extinguished was a cruelty she understood on a cellular level. On the ground, Issei was paralyzed, his mind unable to process the nightmarish reality unfolding before him. Raynor laughed, a sound like shattering glass, and a spear of pure, blinding golden light materialized in her hand. The energy it radiated was holy, searing, and utterly lethal to a mortal. "Don't worry," she cooed, her voice dripping with mockery. "I'll make it quick. It's the least I can do after such a lovely date." She drew her arm back, the light spear humming with concentrated power, ready to extinguish Issei's short, pathetic life. And it was in that precise, critical moment that the world went sideways. No one had seen him arrive. He wasn't there 1 second, and the next he was. Naruto Uzumaki was sitting on a park bench not 20 feet away, partially obscured by the fountain's decorative shrubbery. He wasn't looking at the confrontation. He was looking at a book in his hands, its pages illuminated by the soft glow of the nearby park lamp. He seemed utterly oblivious, a pocket of impossible normalcy in a scene of supernatural terror. He turned a page, the soft rustle of paper a jarringly mundane sound. Raynor, her focus entirely on her target, didn't even notice him. She thrust her arm forward, launching the spear of light. It shot through the air, a golden meteor intent on piercing Issei's heart. The spear never reached him. Halfway to its target, its flight path intersected with the invisible sphere of influence that seemed to perpetually surround Naruto. There was no shield, no explosion, no counter spell. There was only a quiet, horrifying violation of physics. The air in front of the spear tip suddenly thickened, becoming viscous and heavy, like clear molasses. The golden light of the spear began to bend and warp, as if passing through the gravity of a star. The spear itself, an object of pure, solidified holy energy, began to lose its cohesion. The front tip started to fray, not burning or dissipating, but unraveling like a thread from a divine tapestry. The hum of its power pitched down, becoming a discordant, dying groan. The intense heat it generated was instantly absorbed, the air around it growing unnaturally cold. In less than a second, the entire spear of light was deconstructed. It dissolved into a shower of inert, harmless golden motes that glittered in the lamplight for a moment before fading into nothing. The entire event was silent, effortless, and absolute. Naruto turned another page. The effect on the observers was profound. On the rooftop, Rias's jaw was clenched so tight her teeth ached. This was not the conceptual erasure she had witnessed at the warehouse. This was a direct, physical intervention. He had not blocked the attack. He had commanded reality to unmake it. Akino's smile had vanished completely, replaced by an expression of stark, stunned awe. The power she had just witnessed, it wasn't holy, it wasn't demonic. It felt primordial. It was the power of fundamental laws, the authority of existence itself. It resonated with the chaotic storm inside her, not as an equal, but as the silent, unshakable eye of a hurricane that dwarfed her own tempest to insignificance. Raynor was frozen, her arms still extended, her mind refusing to believe what her eyes had seen. Her ultimate weapon, a manifestation of a fallen angel's power, had just ceased to be. For no reason, she stared at the empty air, then her gaze, frantic and terrified, finally found the source of the anomaly. She saw the blonde man on the bench, still calmly reading his book as if her life or death struggle was nothing more than background noise. The sheer, unintentional, crushing contempt of his indifference was more terrifying than any threat. This was not an enemy she could fight. This was a force of nature against which she was as helpless as a leaf in a typhoon. A primal, instinctual fear, the fear of the prey that has just realized it has wandered into the den of an apex predator of a higher order of being, seized her. She didn't hesitate. With a choked cry of pure terror, she spread her wings and shot into the sky, fleeing into the darkness as fast as her demonic power could carry her. Naruto gently closed his book, the soft thud of the cover echoing in the sudden silence. He stood up, tucked the book into his uniform jacket, and began to walk away, his path taking him past the fountain and the still petrified Issei Hyodo. He didn't spare the boy a glance. His intervention had been impersonal, the act of a man swatting a fly that had buzzed too close to his reading lamp. This was the final straw for Akino. The curiosity, the fear, the profound resonance she felt with his power, it coalesced into a singular, overwhelming need for answers. While Rias and the others were still processing the strategic implications of Naruto saving Issei and thus ruining their plan, Akino acted. "I'm going to talk to him." she announced, her voice tight. Akeno, wait, Rias commanded, but it was too late. Akeno had already dissolved into a flicker of lightning, vanishing from the rooftop. She reappeared in a silent, crackling flash in a darkened alleyway, intercepting Naruto as he walked down the quiet, moonlit street. He stopped, his expression unchanged by her sudden, dramatic appearance. He simply looked at her, his blue eyes calm and questioning. Akeno fell back on her trusted persona, the mask that had protected her for years. A seductive, dangerous smile spread across her face. Naruto-kun, was it? You move so quickly, and you seem to have a talent for making things disappear. That's a very naughty trick. I wonder what else you can do. She let a small current of lightning dance across her fingertips. A playful but clear display of power. Her voice was a low, sultry purr, designed to entice, to intimidate, to provoke a reaction. Any reaction. Naruto's response was to give her none of what she expected. He did not react to her beauty, her suggestive tone, or her display of power. His gaze did not linger on her figure. Instead, his eyes held a look of profound, almost clinical, sympathy. His gaze was so clear, so perceptive, it felt like it was peeling back the layers of her persona, stripping away the seductive devil and the sadistic thunder priestess, and looking directly at the terrified, broken child huddled within. That must be exhausting, he said, his voice soft, devoid of judgment. Akeno's smile faltered. I don't know what you mean. The mask, he clarified, his voice still gentle. The constant performance. The need to be the predator so no one will ever see you as the prey again. Smiling through the pain of a soul that has been split in two. It must be a terrible burden to carry. Every word was a perfectly aimed blow, not to her body, but to the very foundations of her identity. He wasn't just guessing. He wasn't just perceptive. He knew. He spoke of her deepest, most secret agony with the casual certainty of a doctor reading a medical chart. Her composure, the carefully constructed wall she had built around her heart for a decade, began to crumble. Her smile felt stiff, artificial. The lightning on her fingertips sputtered and died. You don't know anything about me, she whispered, her voice losing its sultry confidence, becoming fragile, brittle. I know the look of a torn sky, he replied, his gaze still fixed on her, unwavering. I see the storm of your father's lightning and the abyss of your mother's heritage warring within you. You coded in sadism and seduction, but all I see is the sadness of a child who was taught that her very existence was a sin. You punish the world because you were punished for simply being born. That was it, the final, killing blow. He had named it, the core truth she had never dared to speak aloud, the shame and self-loathing that was the engine of her entire personality. He saw it all, and he did not mock it, or fear it, or desire it. He simply named it, with a quiet, sorrowful acceptance. Tears, hot and unwelcome, welled in her eyes. The mask shattered completely. The sultry queen of the Gremory peerage, the sadistic thunder priestess, was gone. In her place stood a young woman, vulnerable and trembling, her violet eyes wide with a mixture of terror and a desperate, burgeoning hope. For the first time in her life, someone had looked at the monster she believed herself to be, and had only seen the scars. He didn't move closer. He didn't offer a comforting touch. He simply stood there, a silent, unwavering presence, allowing her the dignity of her own emotional collapse. He had not come to save her, or to possess her. He had simply held up a mirror and shown her the truth of her own reflection. Without the distortions she had learned to project, Akeno Himehime couldn't speak. She could only stare at the man who, in the space of 30 seconds, had seen more of her soul than anyone in her entire life, and had not turned away. And in that moment, a new, terrifying, and utterly consuming emotion began to take root in the ruins of her carefully constructed world, a profound, earth-shattering sense of devotion. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The weight of a sword, the emptiness of a word. 2 new notes were added to the silent symphony of Kuo Town, nth. EY were as different from the others as steel is from silk. They were not the deep, resonant bass of demonic power, nor the crackling static of the fallen. This was a sharp, piercing C-sharp, a sound of unwavering conviction and honed purpose. It was the energy of the church militant, the tangible presence of consecrated faith. Zenobia Quarta and Irina Shido arrived not like whispers in the dark, but as a righteous, cleansing wind. They walked through the town's streets in the broad daylight, their simple traveling clothes doing little to mask the disciplined, dangerous grace of their movements. Zenobia, with her blue hair and serious, focused expression, was the blade itself, direct, unyielding, and economical in her every motion. Her holy power was a dense, compacted thing, a coiled SPR. Ing of immense force waiting to be unleashed. Irina, her twin pigtails bouncing with her cheerful steps, was the light glinting off the blade's edge, bright, dazzling, and deceptively dangerous. Her faith was an effervescent, joyful aura that was no less potent for its lack of severity. Their mission was simple: the recovery of the stolen Excalibur fragments. Their methods were direct: locate the supernatural powers at play in the region, identify the thieves, and reclaim the holy relics by any means necessary. Their initial survey of the town's energies had yielded the expected results: 2c. Nufficant demonic presences centered on the academy and a few scattered fallen signatures. It was a standard, if volatile, situation. But their senses, trained to detect the subtle nuances of holy and unholy power, also picked up the anomaly. The void, the silent, all-consuming patch of nothingness that defied classification. To the devils, it was a pressure drop. To the fallen, a devouring emptiness. To the agents of the church, it was something else entirely, a conceptual heresy. It was an energy signature that registered as a perfect, absolute zero on every spectrum. It wasn't unholy, for it lacked the chaotic malevolence of demonic energy. It wasn't profane, for it lacked the bitter pride of the fallen. But it most certainly wasn't holy. It was an utter, profound nullification of all dogma, an affront to the very idea of a world defined by the dichotomy of good and evil, heaven and hell. It was, to their senses, the theological equivalent of a black hole. And it was their highest priority. Anything that existed so completely outside their worldview was, by definition, a threat of the highest order. They tracked the anomaly to the town's central plaza, a wide, open space of cobblestone and benches, where pigeons pecked at discarded crumbs and children chased each other around a large, ornate fountain. It was a scene of perfect, mundane peace. And sitting on one of those benches, reading the same simple book he had been holding the night he dismantled Rainer's attack, was Naruto Uzumaki. As they approached, the bustling sounds of the plaza seemed to subtly recede, the space around the three of them becoming a pocket of quiet tension. Naruto did not look up from his book until they stood directly before him, casting their shadows over his page. He slowly raised his head, his blue eyes calm and assessing, showing no surprise at the sudden appearance of two sword-wielding emissaries of the church. "May I help you?" he asked, his voice a placid baritone that seemed entirely at odds with the palpable aura of divine power radiating from the two women. Zenobia, ever the pragmatist, did not bother with pleasantries. Her golden eyes were sharp, analytical, boring into him. "We are agents of the Holy Church. We have detected a significant power anomaly in this region, one that does not conform to any known classification. That anomaly is you. State your name and affiliation." Her hand rested on the hilt of the massive sword wrapped in cloth and chains on her back. "Naruto Uzumaki," he replied simply. "And my affiliation is my own." Irina gave a bright, cheerful smile, though her eyes remained watchful. "Hi, I'm Irina Shido. We're just here on official business from the Vatican. If you're not with the devils or the fallen, then maybe we can be friends." Zenobia shot her partner an annoyed glance. "Irina, this is not a social call. We are dealing with an unknown of immense power. Standard protocol is to ascertain its threat level." She turned her gaze back to Naruto. "Your existence here is a disruption to the balance. You have interfered in the affairs of the fallen angels and have demonstrated an ability that defies magical law. In the name of God and the Holy Church, I demand an explanation." Naruto closed his book, a finger marking his place. He looked from Zenobia's militant intensity to Irina's zealous cheerfulness, his expression unchanging. "You demand," he repeated, the question soft but carrying an incredible weight. "Your authority extends only as far as your beliefs are validated by reality. You have found a phenomenon that does not fit your doctrine. And you have come not with questions, but with demands. That is the sign of a fragile faith." That was the spark. Zenobia's eyes narrowed to slits. To have her faith questioned, the very bedrock of her existence. By this calm, enigmatic man, was an insult that could not be borne. In her world, doubt was a sin, and heresy was a disease to be purged by the holy fire of the righteous. Words were inefficient. Power was the only truth she truly trusted. Heresy, she stated, her voice flat and cold. The quickest way to understand a thing is to see how it responds to force. In a single, fluid motion, she unwrapped the bindings on her back. The chains fell away, and she drew a sword of impossible magnificence. It was Durandal, the legendary, indestructible blade of Roland. A holy sword of such power that its mere presence seemed to purify the air, making the sunlight gleam brighter on its impossibly sharp edge. The power that exploded from it was immense, a tidal wave of holy energy that sent the pigeons scattering in a frantic flurry of wings and made the mortal shoppers in the plaza shiver as if a cold wind had blown through, oblivious to the true cause. Irina took a step back, her smile tightening as she drew her own weapon, a shimmering blade of light that was one of the Excalibur fragments. This was Zenovia's way, direct, overwhelming, decisive. I will give you one final chance to submit to questioning, Zenovia said, leveling the tip of the massive blade at Naruto's heart. He was still sitting on the bench, completely unmoved. Answer me, or I will be forced to take you into custody. Naruto's gaze drifted to the sword. He studied it with the detached curiosity of a metallurgist examining an interesting alloy. It is a fine blade, he commented, his voice still maddeningly calm. Well forged, imbued with a powerful conceptual weight. It carries the belief of millions who have heard its stories. But in the end, it is just an object. And you lean on it as a crutch. A substitute for a faith you have not truly examined for yourself. Blasphemy, Zenovia roared, and her patience shattered. She lunged. It was not a simple charge. She moved with supernatural speed. The cobblestones cracking under the force of her push-off. She crossed the 20 feet between them in less than the blink of an eye, the air screaming in protest. Durandal, a blah, said to be capable of cleaving mountains, was swung in a devastating arc aimed directly at Naruto's neck. To any other being, demonic, angelic, or otherwise, it was an unavoidable, fatal blow. Naruto didn't move. He didn't raise a hand. He didn't erect a barrier. He didn't even blink. He simply watched the blade come. Durandal, the peerless holy sword, stopped. It halted a single inch from his skin. Its movement arrested so suddenly and completely that the universe itself seemed to screech to a halt. There was no impact, no sound of steel on shield. The sword just stopped moving. All of its momentum, all of its holy power, all of its conceptual weight as an ultimate weapon, was instantly and utterly negated in the space between its edge and his flesh. Zenovia's eyes went wide with shock. Her body, still carrying the momentum of her charge, strained against the immovable object her sword had become. The ground beneath her feet fractured further from the strain, her muscles screaming in protest. It felt as if she were trying to push a mountain. She was one of the strongest sword wielders in the world, holding one of the most powerful blades in existence, and she was being held at bay by nothing. Absolutely nothing. How? She grunted, pushing with all of her immense strength, the veins in her temples bulging. The blade did not move a single millimeter. Your sword is designed to cut, Naruto said, his voice still conversational, as if he were discussing the weather. It is a physical object intended to sever the bonds of other physical objects. But the space before me is currently a place where the concept of severing is not permitted to exist. You cannot perform an action where the rules for that action have been temporarily suspended. He was not blocking her sword. He was editing the laws of physics in a localized area to make her attack a logical impossibility. He raised 2 fingers, his movements slow and deliberate, and gently tapped the flat of the unmoving blade. The touch was feather light, yet the feedback that shot up Zenovia's arms felt like a thunderclap. The holy power within Durandal, the roaring divine inferno she was so accustomed to, was snuffed out. The brilliant glow faded, the oppressive, sacred aura vanished. The sword, for a single, terrifying moment, felt like nothing more than a heavy, useless lump of sharpened steel in her hands. He withdrew his fingers. And your faith is a set of rules given to you by others, he continued, his calm, blue eyes meeting her frantic, disbelieving golden ones. You have been told it is absolute. You have been told it is the only truth. Have you ever considered that it might be just as easily suspended? With a flick of his wrist, he didn't push the sword away, but simply released the conceptual lock. The sudden return of inertia sent Zenobia stumbling back several steps, the now heavy sword feeling alien and clumsy in her grip. The holy power flickered back into it, but it felt muted, sluggish. As if the blade itself was now afraid. What are you? Irina stammered from the side, her cheerful facade gone, her Excalibur fragment held in a white-knuckled grip. Naruto's gaze shifted to Zenobia, who was panting, her mind reeling from the absolute negation of her power. You ask what I am, but you don't even know what you are, he said. He wasn't being cruel, he was stating a fact. You wield a holy sword, a symbol of your god's power. But you are a soldier in an army. You follow orders passed down through a bureaucracy. Is that faith, or is it merely employment? We serve God's will. Zenobia shot back, her voice shaking but defiant. We are his instruments on earth. Are you? Naruto's question was a surgeon's scalpel, precise and cutting. Then tell me, what is his will on the matter of the devils in this town? The ones your church made a truce with during the Great War, a truce of desperation because all three sides were facing annihilation. Does the common exorcist know that their leaders shook hands with the Satans? Is that part of the doctrine you preach? Zenobia paled. That was classified information, known only to the highest echelons. And what of your god himself? Naruto continued, his voice dropping slightly, becoming a razor in the quiet plaza. You pray to him. You fight for him. You are willing to die for him. It is a noble, if misguided, sentiment. It is also a pointless one. He paused, letting the silence hang in the air for a moment before delivering the final, devastating blow. Because your god is dead. He died in the Great War, along with the original four Satans. Your faith, your prayers, your entire world, is built around a throne that has been empty for centuries. The ones you call archangels have simply been maintaining the system in his absence, hoping to prevent the chaos that would ensue if the truth were ever revealed. The words struck Zenobia with more force than any physical attack. It was not a boast. It was not a guess. He spoke it with the calm, irrefutable certainty of someone stating that the sky is blue. The world tilted on its axis. God was dead. Her sword, Durandal, suddenly felt impossibly heavy. The weight of its steel was nothing compared to the crushing weight of this revelation. Every battle she had fought, every prayer she had uttered, every life she had taken in his name, for an empty throne. The entire foundation of her existence, the twin pillars of her strength and her faith, had just been pulverized into dust. Her sword was useless against him. Her god was a memory. What was she? What was left? Lies, Irina whispered, tears welling in her eyes. That's a lie. God is love. God is eternal. Her voice lacked conviction. The certainty with which Naruto had spoken had planted a seed of horrific doubt that was already taking root. Naruto stood up from the bench, his book still in hand. He looked at the two shattered holy warriors, his expression holding not a trace of triumph, only a deep, ancient weariness. Belief is a powerful thing, he said softly, as if delivering a final eulogy. But a belief that cannot withstand a simple question is not a faith. It is a cage. I suggest you spend less time trying to enforce the rules of your cage on others, and more time trying to see if the door has been unlocked all along. He turned and walked away, his footsteps silent on the cobblestones. The bustling sounds of the plaza, the cooing pigeons and the laughing children, slowly faded back in, rushing into the vacuum his presence had left behind. He left Zenobia Quarta standing in the middle of the bright, sunny square, clutching a sword that had no power and a faith that had no god. She stared down at the legendary blade in her hands, no longer seeing a holy relic, but a meaningless, heavy piece of metal. Her world wasn't just broken. It was a void, and the only thing that felt real in that moment was the calm, terrifying, truth-filled voice of the man who had just destroyed it. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. A marriage contract written in ash. The air in the Occult Research Club room, usually warm with the scents of tea and old wood, had grown heavy and suffocating. It was thick with the unspoken despair that had descended upon them 2 hours ago, a palpable miasma that seemed to cling to the velvet curtains and dull the polished mahogany of Rias's desk. In the center of that desk, lying starkly against the dark wood, was the source of their silent misery. It was a formal scroll of obsidian vellum, its edges shimmering with a faint, golden magical energy. The text was inscribed in an elegant, flowing script of silver ink, the language a formal, ancient dialect of the demonic tongue. But for all its beauty, it was a cage. A gilded set of chains. A marriage contract, legally and magically binding, between the House of Gremory and the House of Phoenix, finalizing the engagement of Rias Gremory to Riser Phoenix. Rias sat behind her desk, but she was not the regal, confident king her peerage knew. She was a porcelain doll, her posture rigid, her crimson eyes fixed on the scroll with a look of hollowed-out resignation. Her hands were clasped in her lap so tightly that her knuckles were white. The power of destruction, usually a comforting, ambient warmth around her, was inert, suppressed by the sheer weight of her powerlessness. She was a being of immense destructive capability. Yet she was being undone by a piece of paper. The irony was a bitter acid in her throat. Her peerage felt her despair and mirrored it in their own ways. Akano stood by the window, her usual teasing smile absent. She stared out at the darkening sky, her expression a mask of cold fury. Her newfound devotion to Naruto had given her a glimpse of what true freedom and self-acceptance could feel like. Which made the sight of Rias being so thoroughly trapped by tradition all the more infuriating. Yuto Kiba paced restlessly, his hand never leaving the hilt of his sword. His mind racing through 1,000 combat scenarios, each one useless against the intangible foe of politics. Kaneko was curled in her usual chair, but her silence was not the comfortable quiet of observation. It was a heavy, sullen stillness, a silent protest against a world that so often hurt the people she cared about. And then there was Issei Hyodo. Having been unofficially taken under T.O.R.'s protection since the Rainer incident, he was now a frequent, if loud, presence in the clubroom. He did not understand the nuances of devil politics, but he understood injustice. "This is bullshit," he exclaimed for the 5th time, slamming his fist on a small end table, making the teacups rattle. "How can they just do this? Force you to marry some guy you don't even like? That's something out of a feudal-era manga. You're Rias Gremory, just tell them to piss off. It is not that simple," Issei Kiba said, his voice tight with frustration. "This isn't about feelings. It's an alliance between two of the 72 pillars. The Phoenix clan's support is politically crucial for the Gremory family, especially with the current instability in the underworld. So what? She has to sacrifice her entire life for politics?" Issei shot back, his indignation pure and simple. "Yes," Rias said, her voice barely a whisper, yet it cut through the room, silencing everyone. "That is precisely what it means to be the heiress of a great house. Duty is a chain that is heaviest on those born to lead." Into this suffocating silence, a new presence intruded. He had been there the whole time, sitting in a chair in the far corner of the room. Away from the main group. Rias had sent a familiar to him with a desperate, unspoken plea for him to be here, and he had simply appeared, without a word. Naruto. Uzumaki had sat through the entire ordeal in absolute silence, reading his book, a seemingly immovable island of calm in their sea of turmoil. His lack of reaction was, in its own way, unsettling. He did not offer condolences. Nor did he rage alongside Issei. He simply observed, his presence a constant, silent question mark in the room. The oppressive atmosphere was shattered by a flare of crimson light in the center of the room. A massive, complex magic circle, bearing the regal crest of the Gremory clan, expanded across the floor. 2 figures emerged from the light. The first was a man of stunning beauty, with long, crimson hair identical to Rias's. He wore elegant, high-collared robes and carried an aura of such immense, overwhelming power that it forced everyone, save Naruto, to take an involuntary step back. This was Sirzek's Lucifer, one of the 4 great Satans, the ruler of the underworld, and Rias's older brother. The second figure was a stark, almost comical contrast. He was a young man with short blonde hair, dressed in a flamboyant red suit. He preened, a smug, arrogant smirk plastered on his face as his eyes immediately locked onto Rias, devouring her with a possessive, leering gaze. This was Riser Phoenix. "Rias, my darling." Riser's voice was as oily as his smirk. He strode forward, ignoring everyone else, and attempted to take her hand. "You are even more beautiful than Riser remembers. Soon, you will be the loveliest jewel in my collection." Rias flinched, pulling her hand back, a flash of her old fire returning to her eyes. Riser, this is my clubroom. You are a guest here. You will show me the proper respect. Riser merely chuckled, a grating, arrogant sound. So feisty. Riser likes that. It will make taming you all the more enjoyable. Sears X stepped forward, his expression one of gentle, paternal regret, a mask for the cold political calculus beneath. Rias, I know this is difficult. But the elders of both our houses have agreed. This union will solidify the new Satan faction. It is for the good of our world. His gaze swept the room, acknowledging the peerage with a slight nod, before it finally landed on the figure in the corner. His eyes, for a fraction of a second, widened in surprise before his perfect composure returned. The overwhelming aura of a Satan, which subtly bent the will of all lesser beings in the room, seemed to break against Naruto's silence like a wave against a cliff. The anomaly. It was here. Riser followed Sears X's gaze and scoffed. What's this? Did you pick up a new pet, my dear? He seems rather plain. He waved a dismissive hand at Naruto. You can get rid of him. A queen of the House of Phoenix will have no need for such dull-looking servants. Naruto did not even grace him with a look. He slowly, deliberately, turned a page in his book. The sheer, absolute indifference of the act was a greater insult than any retort. Riser's smirk faltered, a flash of anger in his eyes at being so completely ignored, but Sears X cut him off. Riser, perhaps you could allow my sister and I a moment alone with her peerage, Sears X said, his tone polite but carrying the unmistakable weight of a command. Riser, after a final, possessive glare at Rias, gave a theatrical bow and allowed himself to be escorted out by Graphia Lucifuge, Sears X's silver-haired queen, who had appeared as silently as a ghost. With Riser gone, the room became a pressure cooker. Sears X's powerful gaze settled on Naruto. May I ask who this is, Rias? He asked, though the question was clearly not for her. Before Rias could answer, Naruto closed his book. Naruto Uzumaki, a student. I see, Sears X said, his eyes sharp, analytical. He knew this was the being who had unmade a stray, who had neutralized a fallen angel's attack, who had sent ripples of confusion through every faction. You have a very unique presence, Uzumaki-san. It is rare to find someone who can sit so calmly in my own. It was a probe, a veiled question about his power. Stillness is a matter of perspective, Lucifer-sama, Naruto replied, his voice even. A mountain is still to a fly, but the planet it rests on is hurtling through space. End battle of wills was being waged in the room. Sears X, the most powerful devil in existence, was faced with a being whose nature he could not fathom. He was a king who had just discovered a new, unknown continent on his perfectly drawn map. Indeed, Sears X said after a long moment, finally breaking eye contact. He turned back to Rias. There is a way, Rias. Our laws are ancient, but they are not without recourse. You have the right to formally contest the engagement. Through a rating game, hope, fragile and desperate, flickered in Rias's eyes. A rating game, a formal, televised battle between peerages. It was a long shot, but it was a chance. However, Sears X continued, his voice heavy with warning, Riser's peerage is unique. It is composed entirely of members of his household. 15 pieces, all of whom have the regenerative abilities of a Phoenix. And Riser himself, as you know, is for all practical purposes, immortal. The odds are formidable. It was an understatement. It was impossible, her small, inexperienced peerage against 15 immortal regenerating devils. The hope in Rias's eyes died, replaced by the grim certainty of defeat. But it was the only path. I accept the challenge, she said, her voice trembling but firm. Sears X gave her a sad, sympathetic smile. I expected no less. The game will be scheduled in 10 days. Prepare yourselves. With a final, lingering look at Naruto, he and his queen vanished in another flash of crimson light. For a long time, the only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. The peerage tried to be encouraging, speaking of training and strategies, but their words were hollow. They all knew the truth. They were being sent to a public execution. It was into this renewed despair that Naruto finally spoke. His voice, after his long silence, was startlingly clear and resonant. Theatrical, he said. Everyone turned to look at him. What did you say? Rias asked, her voice raw. Naruto stood up, placing his book on the chair. He walked to the center of the room, his presence completely commanding their attention. The rating game. It is a theatrical performance. A piece of political stagecraft. Designed to give you the illusion of choice, while ensuring the desired outcome is all but guaranteed. He looked at Rias, his blue eyes sharp and analytical. Consider the logic. You are being offered a contest of brute force. A domain where your opponent has an absolute, insurmountable advantage. If you lose, you are not only bound by the contract, but you are publicly humiliated, your house's reputation diminished. If, by some miracle, you were to win, what have you proven? That your servants are better fighters than his. You would have won a battle, but you would have made a permanent enemy of a powerful house and embarrassed your own family by resolving a political matter with what amounts to a glorified brawl. It is a fool's gambit. You lose, no matter the outcome. His deconstruction of the situation was so cold, so precise, so utterly devoid of sentiment, that it stripped away all their emotional reactions and left only the stark, ugly truth. They had been so focused on the fight that they hadn't seen the trap for what it was. Then what am I supposed to do? Rias cried out, her composure finally breaking. Surrender. Allow myself to be sold like property. No, Naruto replied, his voice calm amidst her storm. You are a king, so you will stop thinking like a pawn. You will not play their game. You will choose a new board, one where their advantages are irrelevant, and their weaknesses are absolute. He paused, letting his words sink in. Your enemy is not Riser Phoenix. It is the House of Phoenix. You do not need to defeat a man in an arena. You need to utterly rue. In a noble house in the eyes of the world. A chilling silence fell over the room. I cannot do that alone, Rias whispered, seeing the glimmer of a terrifying, but brilliant, new possibility. You will not be alone, Naruto stated. But this path requires a different kind of strength. Not of power, but of will. It is not a clean fight. It is a quiet, brutal assassination of a family's legacy. He turned his head slightly. Akano, please ask Sona Sitri to join us. Tell her it is a matter of mutual strategic interest. An hour later, the venue had changed. They were not in a Gremory war room or a Sitri strategy chamber. Naruto had led Rias and Sona to a place in the human world, a vast, cavernous building scheduled for demolition, the old Kuo Municipal Library. The air was thick with the smell of decaying paper, dust, and the faint, sharp scent of ozone that always lingered faintly around Naruto. Moonlight streamed through the tall, grime-covered windows, illuminating dancing dust motes and casting long, skeletal shadows from the empty bookshelves. It was a graveyard of knowledge, a place of forgotten words and decaying order. A perfect, neutral ground. Why here? Sona asked, pushing her glasses up, her analytical eyes scanning the derelict space. Because their game is one of power and prestige, played in the glittering halls of the underworld, Naruto replied, his voice echoing in the vast, empty space. Our game will be one of shadows and information, played from a place they have forgotten even exists. He raised his hand in the center of the room. A soft, silvery light emanated from his palm, not forming a magic circle, but coalescing into a complex, three-dimensional holographic display that hovered in the air between the three of them. It was not a map of a battlefield. It was a dizzying, interconnected web of names, corporations, financial holdings, and political alliances. At the center of the web, in glowing red letters, was the name, House of Phenex. This, Naruto said, gesturing to the diagram, is your true enemy. Riser is a symptom, this is the disease. The Phoenix clan's power does not truly come from their immortality. That is merely their brand. Their real power comes from their immense wealth, derived from a near monopoly on several key underworld luxury markets, and from their carefully cultivated public image of ancient, untouchable nobility. He pointed to a cluster of corporations on the diagram. They control media outlets, fashion lines, high-end potion breweries. They fund politicians. They host the most exclusive social events. They are not just a house. They are a corporation, and we are going to perform a hostile takeover. Sona's eyes, magnified by her lenses, widened as she studied the diagram. The sheer detail, the pth of the information, it was intelligence her own network would have taken years to acquire. This data, how did you Information is merely a matter of knowing where to look, and having the key to the right doors. Naruto said dismissively. The plan is a coordinated, three-pronged attack, to be executed over the next 24 hours, culminating on the day of the scheduled game. It will be swift, silent, and devastating. His finger traced a line to Sona. Sona Sitri, your part is the financial assault. Your peerage is the most intelligent and technically proficient. I will provide you with a series of encrypted backdoors into the Phoenix financial servers. You will not steal. You will expose. You will uncover their hidden ledgers, their tax evasion schemes, their dummy corporations. You will then anonymously leak this information to the underworld's primary financial news network. Simultaneously, you will use their own offshore accounts to initiate a series of trades designed to trigger a panic sell of their primary stock. Your objective: collapse their financial empire in a single business day. Sona stared, speechless. The plan was audacious, illegal on a dozen levels, and utterly brilliant. It was the most complex and exhilarating strategic problem she had ever encountered. Naruto's gaze then shifted to Rias. Rias Gremory, your part is the reputational assault. Your power lies in your name, your social standing. The Phoenix family's greatest asset is their image of pristine nobility. You will shatter that image. I have compiled a dossier of indiscretions. A new set of files opened in the hologram, containing scandalous images and compromising testimonies. Riser's debauchery is well known, but his family has always managed to suppress it. You will use your IGH society contacts to disseminate these truths. You will not be a grieving fiancé. You will be a concerned noblewoman, leaking this information to protect the sanctity of the devil aristocracy. Why? Our objective: to make the name Phoenix synonymous with scandal and depravity. Rias looked at the files, her stomach turning slightly, but a cold fire began to burn in her veins. This was not the honorable combat of a raiding game. This was dirty, underhanded, and vicious. It was also undeniably effective. And what will you be doing? Sona asked, her mind already racing, calculating the processing power she would need. I will handle the political and psychological assault, Naruto said. I will ensure this information reaches the key political allies who support the Phoenix House. I will make it clear to them, through subtle but undeniable means, that associating with a failing, scandalous house is a poor long-term investment. By the time Riser steps into that arena, his family will be facing financial ruin, public disgrace, and political abandonment. He dispelled the hologram, plunging them back into the dusty moonlight. But I will not do this for you, he said, his gaze locking onto Rias, his voice dropping, becoming deadly serious. I am giving you a weapon more powerful than any army. The choice to wield it, the decision to be this ruthless, to sacrifice the honor of a public duel for the certainty of a silent kill, that choice is yours, and yours alone. It is a test, Rias Gremory. Are you a princess who fights for honor? Or are you a queen who wins by any means necessary? Sona looked at Naruto, her intellectual awe blossoming into something far deeper. He was not just a strategist, he was a kingmaker. He saw the world as a complex machine, and he was teaching them how to find and break the gears of their enemies. Rias stood in the silence of the dead library, the ghosts of forgotten words her only witnesses. She thought of the gilded chains of the contract. She thought of Riser's leering, possessive smirk. She thought of a lifetime spent as a beautiful jewel in his collection. The honor of the duel felt like a fool's prize. She lifted her head, and the despot that had clouded her crimson eyes for hours was gone. In its place was a cold, hard, crystalline fire. It was the fire of a Gremory, yes, but tempered into something new. Something sharper, something more dangerous. Show me how to burn them to the ground, she said. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Unplayed Game. The underworld was a realm of eternal twilight, but on this day, it blazed with the light of 1,000 artificial suns. The Phoenix Colosseum, a monument to the family's vanity, was carved from a single, massive geode of obsidian, its interior polished to a mirror sheen that reflected the roaring, expectant crowds. Tens of thousands of devils, from the lowest-born commoner to the highest-ranking nobles, filled the floating tiers, their collective anticipation a palpable, humming force. Magically amplified commentators, their voices dripping with theatrical hype, echoed through the cavernous space, their words painting a picture of a glorious, honorable contest between ancient houses. It was, as Naruto had predicted, a masterpiece of political stagecraft. In the center of the vast arena floor, which was currently a projected, photorealistic replica of Kuo Academy, Rias Gremory made his grand entrance. He appeared in a pillar of golden fire, his arms spread wide, a preening, insufferably arrogant smile on his face. His all-female peerage materialized around him, each member striking a pose. Their attire a mixture of revealing armor and elegant dresses, designed more for aesthetic appeal than for practical combat. They were beautiful, they were powerful, and their confidence was absolute. The crowd roared its approval. Rias was a celebrity, and this was his stage. Behold, lords and ladies of the underworld. One commentator boomed, his voice shaking the very foundations of the Colosseum. The immortal Rias Gremory and his invincible peerage. Will the crimson-haired princess of Ruin even be able to scathe this unbeatable team? On the opposite side of the arena, the Gremory peerage's entrance was a stark contrast. A simple, crimson Gremory crest flared to life, and they stepped through, not with fanfare, but with a quiet, unnerving focus. They were dressed in practical, dark combat attire. There were no smiles, no waves to the crowd. Rias stood at their head, her crimson hair a banner of defiance, her expression as cold and still as a frozen lake. Her eyes were not on the crowd, or the commentators, or even the replica of her school. They were fixed on one target, Rias Gremory. The look in them was not one of fear or desperation. It was the detached, analytical gaze of a predator that had already chosen its kill. The crowd, sensing the dramatic tension, quieted slightly. The contrast between Rias's flamboyant arrogance and Rias's icy calm was a compelling narrative. This was not the frightened princess they had been led to expect. Rias laughed, the sound amplified throughout the arena. My dearest Rias, did you truly think bringing your athletic little group of misfits would change anything? Rias is generous. Surrender now, and I will be gentle when I claim my prize tonight. Rias did not reply. She simply raised a hand, signaling to the demonic adjudicator hovering high above the field that she was ready. The adjudicator, a high-ranking devil in formal robes, nodded and began the official countdown, his voice a solemn, booming drone. The rating game between the House of Gremory and the House of Phoenix is about to begin. Combatants, take your positions. 10. Rias's peerage fanned out, their formations perfect, their power levels flaring to life. A dazzling display for the cameras. 9. Heba drew a demonic sword, its edge humming. Akino's hands crackled with golden lightning. Kaniko's aura of raw physical power becked. Aim a visible shimmer in the air around her. 8. The artificial suns in the Colosseum brightened, casting harsh, dramatic shadows across the field. The tension was a physical thing, a coiled spring ready to snap. 7. Rias cracked his neck, a smug look of anticipation on his face. He was savoring this moment of public domination. 6. And then, the stagecraft broke. It was not a grand explosion or a dramatic interruption. It was something far more mundane, and therefore, far more shocking. A single, low-ranking devil in an administrative uniform suddenly teleported onto the edge of the arena, his expression one of pure, unadulterated panic. He was screaming, waving a data slate frantically. Adjudicators immediately moved to intercept him, to remove him from the sacred ground of the game, but he was too desperate. Lord Rias, an urgent message for the head of the House of Phoenix. He shrieked, his voice raw with terror. Rias's expression soured. To be interrupted at the peak of his glorious moment by some sniveling clerk. It was an insult. What is the meaning of this? Remove this fool at once, he commanded, but the clerk had thrown his data slate onto the ground, and in doing so, activated a function that hijacked the arena's primary viewing screens. The massive holographic displays that were meant to show close-ups of the coming battle suddenly flickered and changed. The faces of the fawning commentators were replaced by the cold, hard text of the Underworld Financial News Network. Breaking news. PHENEX conglomerate stock in freefall amidst allegations of massive fraud. Trading halted. A collective gasp, a sound like a great, sudden wind, swept through the tens of thousands in the crowd. Rias's smug expression froze on his face. The screen changed again. This time it was the homepage of the Underworld Inquisitor, the realm's most notorious gossip and scandal publication. The headline was enormous, written in a lurid, flaming font. The Shah, me of Phenex, exclusive dossier reveals decades of debauchery, corruption, and perversion. Lord Riser implicated in dozens of scandals. Beneath the headline was a gallery of high-resolution images, Rias in compromising positions with lesser devils, censored documents detailing illegal payments, sworn testimonies from disgraced former servants. It was a character assassination of breathtaking thoroughness. The silence in the arena was now absolute, broken only by the frantic, horrified whispers that were beginning to erupt from the noble boxes. A third headline flashed across the screens, this one from the Stade. Official Devildom Political Review. Political Tsunami. Houses of Glacia Labialis, Furnius, and Belith publicly withdraw support for Phenex Alliance, citing grave concerns over financial and moral impropriety. It was a death sentence. In the space of less than 30 seconds, in front of the entire devil world, the three pillars of the House of Phenex, their wealth, their reputation, and their political power, had been utterly demolished. The panicked messenger was now on his knees, whispering frantically up at his master. "My lord, the vaults are frozen, your father has been detained for questioning by the Ministry of Finance, all our allies have abandoned us, we are ruined." Riser Phenex stood in the center of the arena, his world collapsing in real time. The adoring roar of the crowd was gone, replaced by a horrified, judgmental silence. The respect and fear he commanded were gone, replaced by pity and scorn. His future as a pampered, powerful lord was gone, replaced by a gaping abyss of disgrace and poverty. He began to tremble, his face contorting from disbelief to confusion, and finally, to a mask of pure, incandescent rage. His mind, unable to process the complex financial and political attack that had just destroyed him, latched onto the only thing it could understand. A target, an enemy, the woman standing calmly across the field, her crimson hair like a splash of blood against the green of the simulated grass. "You," he roared, his voice no longer smooth and arrogant, but a raw, guttural scream of fury. He pointed a trembling finger at Rias. "This was you. This is your doing." Quote. The adjudicator, his own composure shaken, tried to intervene. "Lord Riser, the situation is, perhaps we should postpone the game." "No," Riser shrieked, his body erupting in a column of golden flame, the sheer force of his rage making the entire arena tremble. "The game will proceed. I will not be humiliated. I will burn you and your pathetic servants to ash. I will make you suffer for this." This was exactly what Naruto had predicted. A cornered beast, stripped of its status, would lash out with its claws. Pride, when shattered, left nothing behind but rage. Rias Gremory looked at the raging, broken man before her, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a genuine, cold smile touch her lips. "As you wish," she said, her voice broadcast throughout the silent arena. "Adjudicator, let the game begin." The moment the starting bell chimed, the battle was a study in controlled chaos versus mindless fury. Riser's peerage, their own minds reeling from their house's sudden fall, fought with desperate, unfocused aggression. The Gremory peerage fought like surgeons. Riser's knight, a proud swordswoman, charged Kiba. Kiba didn't meet her head on. He dodged, his movements fluid, and whispered, just loud enough for her to hear, "Your contract is worthless now. Who will pay for that pretty sword of yours when your lord is a beggar?" The taunt, base, on intelligence Naruto had provided about her materialistic nature, struck home. Her attack faltered for a crucial second, and Kiba's blade struck not to wound, but to disarm, sending her sword spinning away. A follow-up blow to the back of the neck, and she dissolved into motes of light. Retirement. One down. Issei, to everyone's surprise, did not charge in screaming about harems. He did exactly as he was instructed. He ran to the side, shouting, "Boost! Boost! Boost!" And then, pointing at Riser's twin pawn sisters, he yelled, "Hey! I saw your lord making out with your older sister last week. He said she was way better than you." The sheer, juvenile absurdity of the accusation, combined with its public broadcast, made the two pawns flush with rage and embarrassment, breaking their coordinated attack pattern. This momentary chaos was all Kaneko needed. A silent, unstoppable blur, She slammed into them both, her small fists carrying the force of wrecking balls. 2 more retired. Akeno faced Riser's queen, Ubeluna. A powerful mage, Ubeluna unleashed a torrent of explosive magical energy. Akeno did not counter with her usual sadistic barrage of lightning. Instead, she created a single, condensed spear of holy lightning, a technique she had been refining since Naruto had made her confront her own nature. It was small, precise, and contained. It pierced through the chaotic explosions and struck Ubeluna's staff, shattering the focusing crystal and causing her spell to erupt in her face. Retirement. Within 2 minutes, Riser's entire peerage was systematically dismantled. They were not overpowered. They were outthought, their psychological weaknesses targeted and exploited with chilling precision. They were defeated not by the Gremory peerage, but by the information Naruto had provided. Soon, only Riser was left, standing amidst the fading particles of his defeated servants. He was panting, his suit singed, his eyes wild with a mixture of rage and disbelief. He looked at Rias, who was walking slowly toward him, her peerage forming a silent, menacing semicircle behind her. A mortal Riser cannot be defeated, he screamed, his body bursting into a massive inferno of golden, regenerating flames. He healed the minor scratches he had sustained instantly. You cannot harm me. I will rebuild my house from your ashes. I know I cannot destroy you, Rias said, her voice calm and clear. She stopped just outside the range of his fiery aura. The power of destruction, a sphere of roiling black and red energy, gathered in her hand. But Naruto-kun taught me that victory is not always about destruction. Sometimes, it is about control. Riser laughed maniacally and charged, his hands wreathed in fire. Rias did not launch her attack at him. She aimed it at the ground directly beneath his feet. The sphere of destructive energy did not explode. It imploded. The simulated earth and replicated concrete of the Kuo Academy courtyard dissolved into nothingness, creating a perfect, deep, cylindrical pit. Riser, his charge carrying him forward, had no time to react. He plunged into the darkness with a surprised yell. He was not harmed, but he was trapped. The walls of the pit were sheer, composed of the arena's base material, which was enchanted to be indestructible. His flames could not melt it. He could fly, but the moment he tried to ascend, Akeno unleashed a cage of lightning over the opening. Forcing him back down, Hiba stood at the edge, his sword ready, and Kaneko kicked rubble into the hole, a constant, irritating barrage. Riser Phoenix, the immortal, the invincible, was trapped in a hole, being pelted with rocks like a common pest. The public humiliation was absolute. It was 1,000 times more devastating than any physical defeat. Rias Gremory stood at the edge, looking down at the raging, helpless devil in the pit. Do you surrender, Riser Phoenix? She asked, her voice echoing with the authority of a true queen. Or shall we leave you down there while your house finishes burning to the ground? A long, agonized scream of pure, impotent fury echoed from the hole. Then, a choked, broken whisper. I surrender. The adjudicator's voice, now subdued and full of awe, declared the result. By retirement of all pieces and the surrender of the king, the winner of the rating game is the House of Gremory. A stunned silence held the Colosseum for a long moment, before a slow, hesitant applause began, growing into a roar of astonishment and respect. They had not just witnessed an upset. They had witnessed a paradigm shift. They had seen a princess, backed into a corner, refuse to play the game and instead, with terrifying ruthlessness, burn the entire board. Rias Gremory was no longer just the Satan's little sister. She was a power to be feared in her own right. Far away, in the deep, dusty silence of the derelict library in the human world, the pale blue light of a laptop screen cast a solitary glow. On it, the live feed showed Rias standing tall in victory. The broken Riser being retrieved from his pit by the adjudicators. Naruto Uzumaki watched for a moment, his expression revealing nothing. Then, with a quiet, final click, he closed the laptop. The screen went dark, plunging the vast room back into moonlight and shadow. His part in this game was over. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. A Conversation Between Ages. The aftermath of the unplayed game was not a roar of victory, but a profound, unnerving silence that fell over the entire underworld. The House of Phoenix, a pillar of the devil aristocracy for millennia, had been Financially and socially disemboweled in a matter of hours, their ruin broadcast for all to see. It was not a defeat, it was a public execution, carried out not with fire and brimstone, but with the cold, silent efficiency of a computer algorithm and a well-placed whisper. And while Rias Gremory was credited with the victory, the more astute powers in the three factions knew that such a perfectly orchestrated, multifaceted attack was far beyond the scope of an inexperienced heiress. The ripples of this event did not just lap at the shores of hell, they sent a tidal wave of inquiry through the gilded halls of heaven and the research-cluttered laboratories of Gregory. All investigations, all divinations, all intelligence reports, led back to a single, quiet source. A transfer student, a sensory void, an equation with no solution. The invitation came not as a command or a summons, but as a respectful, almost reverent, inquiry. Naruto was in the derelict library, the cavernous space having become his preferred sanctuary of silence, when a subtle shift in the air heralded a visitor. A perfect, silver magic circle, intricate as a snowflake and bearing the crest of the House of Baal under the authority of Lucifer, materialized on the dusty floor. From it stepped Graphia Lucifuge, her silver hair and made uniform a stark image of composed formality against the surrounding decay. Her power was immense, a quiet, freezing pressure that could bring lesser beings to their knees. But in Naruto's presence, it was simply cold air. She bowed, a gesture of profound respect that was almost unheard of from the strongest queen. Uzumaki-sama, she began, her voice a polite, melodic chime. My lord, Seers X Lucifer, extends an invitation to you on behalf of the leaders of the three factions. They wish to hold a private conference to discuss matters of mutual and profound importance. Your presence is requested, at your convenience. It was not a request. It was a plea, disguised in the language of diplomacy. They were not summoning a potential threat, they were inviting a reality they could not comprehend to the negotiating table. Naruto looked up from his book, his blue eyes meeting hers. He saw the genuine awe and fear warring behind her professional facade. He saw the calculations of her master, Seers X, and the trepidation of the other leaders reflected in her posture. They were children who had seen a ghost in their house and were now politely asking it to explain itself. A faint, weary sense of curiosity stirred within him. Very well, he said. I accept. Graphia produced a single, smooth, white stone, featureless and cool to the touch. This is a key. When you are ready, simply channel a small amount of your energy into it. It will bring you to the designated location. She placed it on the table beside him and, with another perfect bow, vanished in a shimmer of silver light. Naruto picked up the stone. It felt inert, a blank slate. He held it for a moment, then closed his eyes and pushed the smallest, most infinitesimal fraction of his essence into it. The world did not dissolve. It did not tear or fold. It simply ceased to be. One moment he was in the dusty library. The next he was standing in a place that was the very definition of unplace. He was in a boundless, featureless expanse of soft, white light. There was no floor, no ceiling, no walls, only an infinite, horizontless void that was not empty, but full of a silent, omnipresent luminescence. The air, if it could be called that, was perfectly still, without temperature or pressure. There was no sound. There was no time. The concept of duration felt arbitrary here, a suggestion rather than a law. It was a conceptual space, a nexus outside of reality, a blank page upon which the most powerful beings could meet without the constraints of physics. Before him, 3 seats had formed, each a reflection of their occupant's nature. For Seers X Lucifer, it was an ornate, throne-like chair of polished crimson stone, radiating an aura of regal authority and immense demonic power. For the one who would represent heaven, it was a simple, elegant chair of what appeared to be solidified golden light, humming with a gentle, harmonious energy that felt ancient and calming. For the leader of the fallen angels, the seat was a functional, almost industrial-looking chair of black, unknown metal, etched with circuits and runes, pulsing with a restless, inquisitive energy. As he observed, the occupants arrived. Seers X appeared in a silent swirl of crimson energy, his long red hair a stark slash of color against the white void. His power, no longer constrained by the need for subtlety in the mortal world, washed through the space like a physical tide, a declaration of his status as the Devil King. Then, A column of golden light descended, and from it stepped not an angel with wings, but a serene, handsome man with 12 golden pinions of light hovering in a circle behind his back, like a halo of blades. His presence was the opposite of Sirzex's. It was not a crushing force, but an expansive, calming warmth that resonated with the very fabric of the space. This was the Archangel Michael, the acting head of heaven. Finally, a tear in the fabric of the void, like a crack in black glass, opened, and a man with a roguish grin, a dozen black wings, and a researcher's coat thrown over his shoulders strolled out as if he were walking into a bar. His energy was a chaotic, brilliant storm of thought and power, constantly probing, analyzing, and questioning. This was Azazel, the Governor-General of the fallen angels and the leader of Gregory. The three most powerful beings in their known world. The pressure they collectively exerted was enough to warp reality, to bring stars to heel. They turned their attention to Naruto, who had appeared without a sound, without a flare of energy, without any grand entrance at all. He was simply there. As he approached, a fourth seat formed for him. It was a simple, unadorned block of what looked like dark, star-filled stone, a piece of the ancient, silent cosmos given form. It absorbed the light rather than reflecting it. It radiated nothing. His stillness was a stark contrast to their dynamic, overwhelming power. It made them feel loud. Uzumaki-san, Sirzex began, his voice smooth and diplomatic. Thank you for accepting our invitation. I am Sirzex Lucifer. Allow me to introduce Archangel Michael, and Governor-General Azazel. Michael gave a gentle, placid smile. It is an honor to meet a being of such quietude. Azazel leaned forward in his chair, his silver eyes alight with insatiable curiosity, completely foregoing any formality. Right, let's cut the crap. What in the name of the empty throne are you? We've run every analysis we have. You don't register as devil, angel, fallen, dragon, god, or anything in the damn bestiary. Your energy signature is a black hole. You rewrite physical law on a whim to stop a holy sword. You erase beings from existence with a gesture. So, spill, new god on the block. Primordial entity that just woke up from a nap. Extra-dimensional tourist. I've got a betting pool going with the other cadre. And I have 100 shekels on. Sentient topological anomaly. Sirzex sighed at his colleague's bluntness, but did not stop him. It was the question they were all here for. Naruto settled into his seat of silent stone, his gaze sweeping over the three of them. He saw their power, their history, their burdens. He saw the Devil King trying to hold his fractured society together. The Archangel desperately maintaining a system whose linchpin was gone, and the fallen angel trying to understand the universe through science and reason. You are asking the wrong question, Naruto said. His voice calm and even, yet it filled the infinite space with an unshakable authority. You ask, what I am. The answer would be meaningless to you, as you have no frame of reference for it. It would be like describing the color blue to a man born blind. The question you should be asking is, where am I from? An alternate dimension, then. Azazel pressed, leaning forward even further. Parallel reality, higher plane. Naruto gave a slight, weary shake of his head. No, think older. You view reality as a single, continuous line of history. Your creation myths, your great war, your present day. You see it as the totality of existence. It is not. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Imagine a book. Your entire reality, everything you have ever known, is a single chapter. I am a reader who has just finished the previous chapter, and found myself written into the beginning of yours. The three leaders were silent, processing the colossal implications of the metaphor. You are a survivor of a previous universe. Michael asked, his calm demeanor finally cracking, his voice filled with awe and horror. Of a different paradigm of existence, Naruto clarified. A cosmos with different laws, different gods, different fundamental forces. It grew old, it reached its end, and in the cataclysm of its passing and the birth of this new iteration, I endured. I was reborn here, with the memories and the substance of what I was. He looked at them, his blue eyes holding the weariness of eons. I was a king, in a world of sages. I have commanded armies that could shatter galaxies. I have watched stars be born and die like fireflies in a summer dusk. I have seen gods rise to omnipotence, only to fade away from the simple, inexorable passage of time. The power you three wield, which seems so absolute to you, feels to me like the first, clumsy attempts of a child learning to light a fire. He was not boasting. He was stating a fact with the flat, tired tone of a scholar reciting a textbook. The revelation stunned them into silence. Their millennia of history, their epic wars, their godlike power, he had just framed it all as infantile. It was Azazel who recovered first, his scientific mind buzzing, overriding his pride. Incredible. The energy scales required, the metastable state of your soul, this explains the absolute nature of your abilities. You're not casting spells based on this universe's system. You're imposing the laws of your old reality onto this one, like running legacy code on a new operating system. A crude but functional analogy, Naruto conceded. Searsex, the politician, saw the terrifying strategic implications. If you are what you say you are, then what are your intentions? Why reveal yourself now? I have no intentions, Naruto said, a note of profound tiredness in his voice. My only desire was to live a quiet life, to observe this new, young world and perhaps find a measure of peace I have not known for ages. But I cannot do that. Because your world is in far greater danger than you know. And your petty squabbles are ringing the dinner bell for the wolves outside your door. What wolves? Michael asked, his expression growing grim. What danger? Quote, Naruto leaned forward slightly. Your world is not the universe. It is a terrarium, a carefully constructed, sealed pocket of reality, protected from the true, chaotic, and predatory nature of the cosmos at large. You call it Earth, the underworld, heaven, the mythological pantheons. In truth, it is the sealed realm of Yggdrasil, one of many such, Prezer. Vesses created at the dawn of this universe. He looked directly at Michael. The being you knew as God did not create the universe. He was one of the architects, one of the wardens, of this particular seal. A being of immense power and foresight, who worked with the original Satans and other faction progenitors to build a wall around your cradle to protect you from things you cannot possibly imagine. Cosmic predators that feed on belief. Conceptual contagions that unravel reality. Beings from the outer dark whose very existence is a paradox that can erase a timeline. The foundations of their reality crumbled. Their entire history, their entire cosmology, was a lie. They were not masters of their own destiny, but sheltered children, ignorant of the horrors their parents had kept at bay. And your great war, Naruto continued, his voice becoming cold, accusatory, was the act of spoiled children setting fire to their own nursery. When you killed your god and the original Satans, you did not just kill your leaders. You murdered your gatekeepers. You fractured the primary lock on the seal. For centuries, its power has been bleeding out, the barriers weakening. My arrival here, my rebirth into this world, was not a coincidence. It was a symptom, a cosmic tremor caused by a powerful soul slipping through the developing cracks. He leaned back, his piece said, I can feel it. The seal is failing. The scent of your vibrant, power-filled, and poorly defended little world is beginning to leak out into the greater cosmos. The wolves are starting to turn their heads. And you three, the inheritors of this broken kingdom, are still so consumed with your internal politics, your posturing and your games, that you are sharpening your knives for each other while a hurricane is forming just off your coast. In a hidden enclave, miles and dimensions away from the white void, a grizzled fallen angel with 10 black wings stared into a scrying pool of dark water, his face a mask of rapturous, insane glee. Cacophony, one of the leaders of the fallen angels and a fanatical warmonger, had been using a forbidden scrying artifact to spy on Azazel. He had witnessed the entire conversation. But his mind, twisted by centuries of bitterness and a lust for glorious battle, had filtered the information through the lens of his own obsession. He didn't hear the warning. He didn't comprehend the scale of the cosmic threat. He heard only that God was dead, a fact he had long suspected but now had confirmed. He heard that this newcomer, Naruto, wielded power that could shatter galaxies. A weapon, Cacophony whispered to himself, his eyes glowing with a feverish light. A living catalyst. He's the key. If I can provoke him, if I can force him to unleash that power on Kuo Town, the devils and the angels will have no choice but to respond in kind. The fragile truce will be shattered. The glorious war can begin anew. He completely misunderstood. He saw Naruto not as an ancient warden warning of a coming storm, but as a sword lying on the ground, waiting for a hand to grasp it and swing it at his enemies. Back in the white, timeless space, the three leaders were reeling, their worldviews shattered. What do you want from us? Sirzex finally asked, his voice strained. Nothing, Naruto replied, but your problem has now become my problem. I desire a quiet life, and the coming storm will be anything but quiet. I am telling you this so that you might have a chance to get your houses in order. To stop your pointless conflicts and begin reinforcing the seal before it is too late. He stood, his form seeming to flicker, as if he were already detaching from this conceptual space. Your great war never ended. You've just been living through a ceasefire. The real war is coming, and you are not remotely prepared. Quote, with those final, chilling words, he vanished. Not in a flash of light or a tear in space, but by simply ceasing to be there, leaving his silent, dark stone throne empty. He left the three most powerful beings in their world alone in an infinite void, crushed by the weight of a truth so immense it had rendered their entire existence small and fragile. Our millennia-long conflict was not a grand struggle for dominion. It was a footnote, a prologue to a horror story they had not even known was being written. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Cacophony of a War God. Night had fallen over Kuo Academy, and with it, a deceptive peace. The last of the day students had long since departed, leaving the sprawling campus to its nocturnal inhabitants. In the Occult Research Club room, the soft clinking of teacups was the only sound, a comfortable quiet as Rias's peerage decompressed from a day of training. A few buildings over, the student council room was a hive of focused activity. The rustle of papers and the quiet tapping of keyboards the soundtrack to Sona Sitri's relentless pursuit of order. It was a normal evening in the secret heart of their shared territory. The first sign that the world was about to break was not a sound, but a feeling. It was a sudden, sickening lurch in the fabric of reality, a pressure that descended on the school ground. With the weight of a collapsing mountain. The air grew thick, heavy, and stagnant, like the atmosphere at the bottom of a deep-sea trench. Outside the windows, the familiar, comforting lights of Kuo Town did not just disappear. They were violently erased, replaced by a swirling, impenetrable dome of bruised purple and midnight black energy that shimmered with malevolent power. Every supernatural being on campus felt it as a physical blow. In the orc, Kaneko fell to her knees with a choked gasp, her senses overwhelmed by the suffocating pressure. Kiba had a sword in his hand before he consciously registered the threat. His face pale. Rias and Akino were on their feet instantly, their demonic power flaring to life, pushing back against the oppressive force that was crushing down on their home. In the student council room, Sona's head snapped up, her glasses sliding down her nose. The magical projections she was studying flickered and died, the flow of energy from the outside world completely severed. Tsubaki was already at the window, her hand glowing with a pale blue light as she pressed it against the invisible barrier. The energy was repelled with a sharp crackle, leaving a web of frost on the inside of the glass. Report, Sona commanded, her voice knife-sharp. A full-spectrum containment field of immense power, Tsubaki stated, her tone grim. Demonic, but laced with a significant amount of holy energy. It's a hybrid construction. We are completely isolated. All communication, teleportation, and sensory links to the outside world are severed. They were trapped. The two most powerful peerages in the region, locked inside a cage with an unknown, and undoubtedly hostile, predator. A voice, amplified by magic to the level of a thunderclap, boomed from the sky, shaking the very foundations of the school. It was a voice filled with manic glee, with the joyous, ecstatic madness of a fanatic who has waited centuries for this single, glorious moment. Greetings, devils of Kuoh, heirs of Gremory and Sitri. I do hope I haven't interrupted your evening. Heads turned upwards, hovering high above the clock tower, suspended in the swirling vortex of the barrier, was a figure. He had 10 magnificent, jet-black wings spread wide, a symbol of power and pride that identified him instantly to the leaders. Rias stared in horror, her blood running cold. It can't be, Kokobile. The voice roared with laughter. Leader of the fallen angels, servant of no god, and your humble host for this evening's festivities. I have grown so very bored of this pathetic peace. So, I decided to start a war. And you, my dear devils, along with the two little church mice I sense scurrying around, have the distinct honor of being the opening act. As he spoke, the ground D of the main school quad began to tremble violently. The earth cracked and split, not like a natural earthquake, but as if the gates of hell itself were being forced open. From these burgeoning fissures, a cacophony of monstrous howls erupted, and figures began to claw their way out. They were enormous, hulking beasts, each the size of a small car, with 3 canine heads, eyes glowing like hot coals, and slobbering jaws that dripped with a viscous, foul-smelling ichor that sizzled and smoked where it touched the grass. A welcoming party, Cocobeel's voice boomed. A horde of my finest Cerberus hounds. Enjoy yourselves. Your screams will be the overture to my grand symphony of destruction. The battle for Kuo Academy began without a formal declaration. There was no time for strategy meetings or political posturing. The moment the first Cerberus charged the main school building, the doors burst open and the combined forces of the Occult Research Club and the Student Council met them head-on. There was no rivalry, no hesitation. The red crest of Gremory and the blue crest of Sitri flared side by side, a silent, unified declaration that this ground would not be yielded. From a side path, another figure joined the fray. Zenobia Quarta, who had been on her way to the library in hopes of finding Naruto, was now trapped with them. She had Durandal unsheathed, its holy light a searing beacon in the demonic twilight. Her face was a mask of cold, righteous fury. This was not a fight for a dead god. This was a fight to protect the territory of the only being who had ever told her the truth. Her cause was new, but her faith in it was absolute. The battlefield was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. It was immediately apparent that these were not the same disparate groups that had existed weeks ago. Naruto's influence, his lessons in strategy and cooperation, had reforged them into a single, cohesive fighting force. Tsubaki, coordinate the eastern flank. Their approach is staggered. Use Rias' defensive barriers to create a choke point. Sona's voice was crisp and clear, cutting through the din of battle. She stood on the steps of the Student Council building, the entire bat. T. Leffield laid out before her like a living Go board. She was the nerve center, directing her pieces with unerring precision. Rias, the central group is too dense. We need to break their formation. Sona called out. On it. Rias replied, her hands glowing with the terrifying, roiling energy of the power of destruction. She did not unleash a wild, all-consuming wave. Instead, she formed a dozen smaller, condensed spheres of power and launched them like precision-guided missiles, each one striking the ground between the hounds, using the concussive force of their implosions to scatter the pack and shatter their momentum. It was a display of control she had never possessed before. Akeno rose into the air, a storm incarnate. But this was not the gleeful, sadistic barrage of her past. Her lightning was a focused, lethal tool. She combined the pure, destructive force of her devil magic with the searing, holy power of her fallen heritage, a technique she had once feared, now wielded with a calm, deadly focus. A spear of intertwined black and gold energy shot down, not only electrocuting a Cerberus but negating the demonic magic that held its form together, causing it to dissolve into black dust. On the ground, it was a dance of blades and brute force. Yuto Kiba and Tsubasa Yura, Sona's knight, moved as one, their swords a silver torrent. They did not compete, they complemented. Kiba would feint, drawing a three-headed lunge, and Tsubasa's blade would flash in from the side, severing a vital tendon. Their speed was a blur, a perfect symphony of high-speed combat. Kaneko and Saji Genshiro held the main line. Saji extended a glowing Vritra-imbued whip from his arm, lashing out to ensnare the legs of a charging beast, while Kaneko, a silent, unstoppable projectile, would slam into its chest. Her small fist carrying enough force to shatter bone and pulp organs. She fought with a ferocity that was deeply personal, her golden eyes burning with a protective fire. This was his quiet place, and she would not let it be defiled. And then there was Zenobia. She was a whirlwind of holy devastation. Durandal was not just a sword, it was an extension of her indomitable will. She carved through the demonic beasts, each swing a clean, perfect arc of destruction. Her battle cries were not prayers to heaven, but declarations of her new purpose. For the truth he has shown me, she roared, cleaving a Cerberus in two. For the world he walks in. Issei, surprisingly, was not far behind. He was terrified, yes, but he was also filled with a desperate courage. Boost. Boost, boost, boost. The green gauntlet on his arm shouted. He channeled that power not into a single, reckless attack, but into short, controlled bursts, using the concussive force to knock hounds off balance, to save a teammate from being flanked. He was learning to be a soldier, not just a pervert with a sacred gear. Slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. The horde of monsters was thinning. The combined peerages, fighting as one seamless unit, were holding their ground, protecting the school, winning. High above, Cacophony watched, a frown of boredom and disappointment on his face. He had expected screams, chaos, a swift and brutal slaughter. He was getting competence, teamwork. This was not the glorious spark of war he had envisioned. It was pest control. Enough of this tiresome prelude, he sighed, his voice once again booming across the battlefield. With a lazy flick of his wrist, he unleashed a wave of pure power that slammed into the ground, sending the remaining Cerberus hounds LVing into shadows and knocking every member of the allied force off their feet. He descended slowly, landing in the center of the now scorched quad with the grace of a fallen deity. He looked down at the panting, bruised students, his expression one of utter contempt. Pathetic, he spat, Searsex's little sister and the Sitri brat, playing at soldiers. And a carrier of a holy sword, fighting alongside them. How far my old enemies have fallen. His eyes landed on Issei, and then on Zenobia. And you too, still clinging to your faith. Still praying to a silent heaven. He laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. Let me share a little secret with you, something your precious leaders in the church and heaven have been hiding for centuries. God is dead. He was killed in the Great War. You were orphans, praying in an empty house. Issei stared in shocked disbelief. But Zenobia merely pushed herself to her feet, leveling Durandal at the fallen angel, her face grim but resolute. I know, she said, her voice clear and strong. I was told by someone far more trustworthy than a bitter relic like you. Cacophony's eyes widened slightly in surprise, then narrowed in fury. So, you've met him, then. The anomaly. Good. Because you are all boring me. I didn't come here for you. I came for him. Your destruction is simply the bait I will use to draw the real monster out of his cave. He raised his hands to the sky. The ambient holy and demonic energy within the barrier began to coalesce above him, drawn into a swirling vortex of unimaginable power. It compressed, solidified, forming a sphere of pure, incandescent light. A mixture of the holiest gold and the most profane black. It grew rapidly, a miniature sun of pure annihilation that pulsed with the promise of absolute destruction. Behold, Cacophony roared, his voice ecstatic with the anticipation of the coming chaos. This is the power that killed a god. I will wipe this entire town from the face of the earth. The resulting power vacuum will force Searsex and Michael to ACT. And from the ashes, a new, glorious war will be born. The spear of light, now a massive, throbbing orb that dwarfed the school itself, hummed with a reality-shattering note. The allied peerages stood frozen, looking up at the coming apocalypse. They were out of energy, out of options. They could do nothing but brace for an impact they knew, with absolute certainty, they could not survive. This was the end. And then, it wasn't. The world went silent. The deafening, reality-bending hum of Cacophony's ultimate attack ceased. The frantic, terrified beating of their own hearts vanished from their ears. The howling of the wind stopped. It was not a quiet. It was an active, oppressive, absolute silence, as if the very concept of sound had been surgically removed from existence. The gargantuan sphere of destructive energy froze in the sky, its violent, swirling energies arrested, held in perfect, impossible stasis. The dust motes in the air stopped dancing. The world had become a single, frozen photograph. A figure was standing on the roof of the main school building, a place that had been empty a moment before. Naruto Uzumaki. He was not radiating power. He was not posturing. He stood there in his simple school uniform, looking at the scene of frozen chaos below him with an expression of profound, weary disappointment. It was the look of Allah. Ndlord, who had just discovered his tenants had thrown a destructive party in his prized property. Cacophony, frozen in his pose of triumph, could still move his eyes. He saw Naruto, and a look of ecstatic, insane victory spread across his face. He's here. It worked. Now, show me the power that ends worlds. Fight me. Naruto did not deign to look at the assembled students, who were staring up at him with a mixture of awe, relief, and primal terror. His entire attention was on Kokobile and the weapon he had created. He did not speak. He simply raised his right hand. A rune, a complex, shimmering sigil of pure silver light, bloomed in the air directly in front of the frozen sphere of power. It was not a shield. It was a statement. Concept. Destruction. Status. Denied. The massive orb, containing enough energy to vaporize a city, did not explode. It did not fizzle out. It simply unraveled. Its component energies were deconstructed, its purpose was nullified, and it dissolved into a gentle, harmless shower of glittering gold and black particles that drifted down like silent, beautiful snow. Kokobile's jaw, had he been able to move it, would have dropped. The attack he had poured his very essence into, the weapon that was to be his masterpiece, had been unmade as easily as erasing a line of chalk from a blackboard. Naruto's gaze shifted to Kokobile himself. A second rune, even more intricate than the first, materialized in the air before the fallen angel. Kokobile opened his mouth, a silent, furious scream forming on his lips. He tried to summon his power, to fight, to flee. Nothing happened. His connection to his own energy was severed. His muscles refused to obey his commands. He was a statue of flesh and bone. Concept. Agency. Status. Revoked. A third rune formed, this one wrapping around Kokobile's 10 magnificent black wings. The wings, the symbol of his station, his pride, his very identity as one of the original cadre, began to flake away at the edges. Not burning, not tearing, but turning to fine, black dust that was caught in a non-existent breeze. The process was silent, inexorable, and utterly humiliating. Concept. Identity. Status. Erased. Kokobile's eyes, the only part of him he could still move, were now wide with a dawning, absolute horror. He was finally beginning to understand. This was not a fight. This was not a challenge between two great powers. This was a dissection. He was a specimen on a slide, being systematically taken apart by a being whose understanding of existence was so far beyond his own that he may as well have been a god. A final, fourth rune. A pattern of such impossible, multi-dimensional complexity that it hurt the eyes to even look at it, appeared and then gently, almost tenderly, branded itself onto Kokobile's forehead. It glowed with a cold, white light for a single instant. Concept. Time. Status. Looped. The fallen angel's terror was frozen on his face, his consciousness trapped in the single, eternal microsecond of his ultimate powerless defeat, a monument to his own hubris. The oppressive silence lifted. The sound of the wind, the distant hum of the city beyond the now fading barrier, the frantic, ragged gasps of the students below, it all came rushing back in. The battle was over. The war god was a statue. The combined peerages of Gremory and Sitri, along with the lone swordswoman of a dead god, could only stare. They had fought with all their might, bled for this school, and had ultimately been brought to the brink of annihilation. And Naruto had ended it all in less than 10 seconds, without taking a single step. Without speaking a single word. The gulf between them was not a gap, it was a cosmos. Naruto looked down from the roof, his gaze sweeping over the scene. He saw the shattered windows, the deep fissures in the earth, the scorched patches of lawn, the terrified faces of the students, and the frozen, winged statue in the center of the quad. He let out a long, weary sigh, a sound that seemed impossibly mundane, impossibly normal, after the cosmic display they had just witnessed. The sound carried across the silent, ruined grounds, a final, definitive statement on the entire affair. This, he said, his voice laced with the tired annoyance of a man looking at a massive, unexpected repair bill, will be a logistical nightmare to repair. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Choosing of Queens. The silence that followed the end of the world was a fragile, crystalline thing. The swirling, malevolent dome of Kokobile's barrier dissolved like smoke, revealing the familiar, star-dusted night sky and the distant, indifferent lights of Kuo town. The air, no longer crushed by demonic pressure, rushed back in, carrying the mundane sense of cut grass and damp earth, a stark sea contrast to the lingering smell of ozone and terror. On the ruined quad, the allied peerages picked themselves up, their bodies aching, their minds reeling. They were alive. They were alive when, by every law of power and logic. They should have been a fading memory in a smoking crater. They looked at the scorched earth, at the frozen, winged statue of the war god that now served as a grotesque monument to its own hubris. And then their gazes, as one, were drawn upwards. He was still there, on the roof, a solitary figure against the constellations. The wind tugged at his uniform, the only thing about him that seemed to move. He was not a savior descending from on high. He was an ancient, immovable fact of the universe that had just reasserted its dominance. The very air shimmered, and 3 new figures appeared on the quad. Their arrivals announced by flashes of crimson, gold, and fractured black light. Sirzex, Michael, and Azazel, the rulers of their world. They had felt the colossal spike of Kokobeel's power, the subsequent, terrifying silence of Naruto's intervention, and the collapse of the barrier. They had come expecting to find a war zone. They found a classroom. Their eyes took in the scene. The exhausted but living students, the defeated Cerberus hounds fading into ether, the petrified form of their fellow leader. Then, like the students before them, their gazes were irresistibly drawn to the man on the roof. The expressions on the faces of these godlike beings were not of anger or authority. It was a complex, chilling mixture of awe, profound relief, and a deep, primal fear. It was the look of kings who had just been reminded that there were things in the cosmos far older and more powerful than their crowns. Sirzex did not shout. Michael did not offer blessings. Azazel did not make a single witty remark. They simply stood there, silent witnesses. Their presence, more than the battle itself, was a formal acknowledgement to everyone on the field. The old order was finished. A new, supreme power now resided in this town, and it was standing on their school's roof. Naruto's gaze swept over the faction leaders, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He had no interest in the political cleanup, the treaties that would be broken and remade, the explanations that would be fabricated for the lower ranks. He had acted. The consequences were their problem to manage. With a final, weary glance at the mess, he simply stepped back from the edge of the roof and vanished from sight. His departure left a vacuum that was more profound than his presence. The spell was broken. The students sagged with a collective, bone-deep exhaustion. The 3 leaders finally moved, their expressions grim, their minds already churning with the impossible task of explaining this night to their respective factions. The age of deniability was over. Naruto did not return to his apartment. He walked through the quiet, sleeping town, the chaos of the battle fading behind him like a bad dream. He sought out the one place that felt truly quiet, a place of silent contemplation. The old Shinto shrine where he had first spoken to Akeno. The air here was cool and clean, smelling of ancient cedar and damp stone. Moonlight filtered through the branches of the ginkgo trees, painting the world in shades of silver and black. He sat on the Ingawa, the wooden veranda of the main shrine building, and looked out at the silent, moss-covered garden. He did not seek meditation, but simply stillness. He did not have to wait long. He knew they would come. The night's events had been a catalyst, an emotional crucible that would force a clarification of the new, unspoken bonds that had formed between them. The first to arrive was Zenobia. She did not approach with stealth. Her footsteps were firm, deliberate on the stone path, the sound of a soldier approaching a command post. Durandal was strapped to her back, but she did not carry herself like a warrior approaching a fight. She carried herself like a pilgrim who had finally reached the end of her journey. She stopped before the veranda, her golden eyes locking onto his, and knelt on one knee in the gravel, her head bowed. "I came to you before with a sword and a demand," she began, her voice a low, formal declaration, stripped of all its previous arrogance. "My sword was proven to be a child's toy, and my demands were built on a foundation of lies. You destroyed my world, and in doing so, you showed me the first true thing I have ever known." She looked up, and the conviction in her eyes was a holy fire, brighter than any divine blessing she had ever received. "The faith I had was for an empty throne. A memory. It was hollow. What I feel now is not. Your power, your truth, it is real, tangible, absolute." She placed a fist over her heart. "I am a sword. That is my purpose, my nature. A sword is meaningless without a hand to wield it for a cause worthy of its steel. My old cause was a lie. I am asking you to give me a new one. My sword, My life, my will, they are yours to command. Let me serve a truth that I can see. Naruto looked down at the kneeling zealot, at the absolute, unwavering faith she was offering him. He saw not a servant, but a powerful, broken tool, seeking to be reforged. Stand up, Zenobia Quarta, he said, his voice quiet but firm. Zenobia hesitated, then obeyed, rising to her feet. Your will is your own. To surrender it is to surrender the very thing that makes you strong. I have no need for servants, and I have no desire for blind obedience. A sword that only follows orders is predictable and easily broken. A sword that thinks, that understands why it fights, that chooses its own battles, that is a weapon that can change the world. He met her gaze, his blue eyes clear and deep. I accept your strength, and I accept your loyalty. But I will not accept your servitude. If you are to stand with me, you will do so as a partner, not as a tool. Your cause is not to serve me. It is to protect the truth we both now know, that this world is fragile, and it needs guardians, not soldiers. Zenobia stared, a storm of emotions crossing her face. Partnership, not servitude. The concept was so alien, so much more profound than the simple fealty she had been prepared to offer. It was a greater responsibility, and a far greater honor. She gave a single, sharp nod, her eyes shining with a new, stronger resolve. It was not the faith of a follower. It was the conviction of a founder. As Zenobia stepped back, taking up a silent, sentinel-like post at the edge of the shrine grounds, a new figure emerged from the shadows of the Torii gate. Akeno. She moved with a silent grace, her dark hair seeming to drink the moonlight. The seductive, dangerous aura she usually wore was completely absent. She was not the Thunder Priestess tonight. She was just Akeno. She approached the veranda and simply sat beside him, not too close, but sharing the same space, the same silence. For a long time, she said nothing, just looked out at the same moonlit garden. When he attacked, she began, her voice a soft, fragile whisper. When that sphere of light grew in the sky, I wasn't afraid of dying. She hugged her knees to her chest. I was angry, angry that I would die without ever thanking you. She turned to look at him, her violet eyes shimmering with unshed tears. The playful mask was gone, leaving behind a raw, painful vulnerability that was more beautiful than any facade. For my entire life, I have been two people. The angel's daughter, the fallen spawn. The monster, and the mask I wore to control it. Everyone who looked at me saw one or the other. They desired one, and they feared the other. No one ever saw me. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. But you did. That first night, you looked at me and you didn't see a devil, or a fallen angel, or a prize to be won. You saw the scars. You saw the sad little girl hiding behind the lightning. You didn't try to fix me. You didn't try to save me. You just saw me. And you didn't turn away. She took a shuddering breath. By your side, I feel whole. The storm inside me is quiet. I am not two halves of a war. I am just Akeno Himahima. And I have never known peace like that. She offered him a small, watery, but genuine smile. I don't have a house to offer you, or an army to command for you. All I have is a broken, but finally whole, heart, and it's yours. Please, let me stay by your side. It's the only place I've ever truly felt safe. Naruto turned to her, and his gaze was filled with a gentle, ancient warmth. He did not offer empty platitudes or grand declarations. He simply reached out and, with his thumb, gently wiped the tear from her cheek. His touch was not one of passion, but of profound acceptance. Your heart was never broken, Akeno, he said softly. It was simply a sky waiting for its storm to pass. Your place is not by my side. It is with me. There is no need to ask for what is already freely given. His simple words, his simple touch, were an anchor, a promise of a home she had never had. Akeno's composure finally broke, and she let out a soft, cathartic sob, not of sadness, but of a relief so profound it shook her to her very soul. The next visitor's arrival was announced by the regal, confident click of heels on the stone path. Rias Gremory approached, her Rimson hair a defiant banner in the moonlight. She was no longer the desperate princess. The night's battle, and the victory that had preceded it, had forged her into something more. She stopped before the veranda, a queen surveying her chosen king. They are calling it the Miracle of Kuo, she said, her voice strong. My brother and the other leaders are already spinning a narrative. That Koka, Beale underestimated the combined strength of our houses. That it was a hard-won victory. They are hiding the truth. Hiding you. She shook her head. They are fools. They are trying to put a blanket over a volcano. She met his gaze, and her eyes burned with an intensity that matched her hair. I was a fool, too. I came to you with a problem, and you gave me a solution that I never could have conceived. You showed me what true power is. It's not about destruction, or honor, or noble titles. It's about seeing the entire board, and having the will to flip it over when the game is rigged against you. She took a step closer. Her entire being radiating a powerful, ambitious aura. I don't want to just be Rias Gremory, the Satan's little sister. I want to build something new. A faction where street rank is measured by merit and intelligence, not just by bloodlines. I have the name, the political capital, and the ambition. But I am not enough. You are the piece that changes the entire game. Her voice softened, the political giving way to the personal. I feel more for you than simple admiration, Naruto. You challenge me, you inspire me, and you terrify me, all at once. And I want more of it. I want all of it. She made her declaration, her offer. Stand with me, not as a secret weapon, but as my partner. My king. Together, we can burn the old, corrupt world down and build a better one from its ashes. I offer you my power. My house. All of me. Naruto regarded her, seeing the brilliant, passionate fire of her ambition. He respected it, but he also knew she was still thinking in the terms of the old world. A queen does not offer her kingdom to a king, Rias Gremory, he said, his voice gentle but firm, correcting her premise. She invites him to help her protect it and make it stronger. Your ambition is a worthy one. But you must be the one to build your throne. You cannot ask another to build it for you. Do not seek to attach your house to my power. Seek to build your own power. A power so great that it can stand beside mine as an equal. He offered her not a crown, but a challenge. Build your new world. I will be your staunchest ally. I will be your shield when you are weak, and your sword when you are righteous. But the crown must be yours, and yours alone. Earn it. Rias stared, processing his words. He was not rejecting her. He was raising the stakes. He was demanding more of her than anyone ever had. He was demanding that she become a true queen, not just in name, but in deed. A slow, determined smile spread across her face. It was the most exhilarating, most terrifying, and most wonderful challenge she had ever been given. The final visitor did not come to the shrine. To meet her, Naruto knew he had to go to her domain. He found Sona Sitri in the silent, orderly student council room. The Go board was set up between them, as he knew it would be. They sat, and for a long time, the only sound was the soft, rhythmic click of stones on the board as they played. This game was different from the first. There was no test, no hidden lesson. It was a true battle of minds, a silent, complex conversation. Sona played with a newfound creativity, her moves no longer bound by rigid, textbook logic, but flowing with an intuitive grace she had not possessed before. She still lost, but the gap had narrowed. The game was beautiful. When the final stone was placed, Sona looked up from the board, pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose. Her expression was calm, her mind clear. I have run every possible simulation based on the new data you represent, she began. Her voice as crisp and precise as her game. I have analyzed the political, military, and social ramifications of your existence, and the subsequent destabilization of the current power structure. I have cross-referenced this with my own long-term personal and professional objectives. She folded her hands on the table. My calculations are complete. The conclusion is inescapable. The optimal path forward for my future. For the future of Devil Society, and for the successful navigation of the existential threat you have revealed, is a path that includes you as a permanent, core variable. She looked him directly in the eye, her gaze unwavering. There was no blush, no coy hesitation. There was only the absolute certainty of a mathematician who has just solved the ultimate equation. Therefore, I am proposing a formal, lifelong alliance, a partnership of mind, of goals, and of futures. I have come to respect your intellect, admire your methods, and value your presence. This is the most logical and, I have concluded, the most desirable course of action. It was the most Sona Sitri confession imaginable, a declaration of love presented as the conclusion of a doctoral thesis. Naruto felt a rare, genuine smile touch his lips. Your logic is sound, Sona Sitri. Your conclusion is valid, but your data set is incomplete. Sona blinked, her composure faltering for a second. Incomplete? How? You have failed to properly account for the emotional variable, Naruto said, his voice softening. You call it a desirable course of action. The more common term is want. You did not come to this conclusion just because it is logical. You came to it because it is what you want. It is important to acknowledge that part of the equation, as well. It is often the most powerful part. For the first time, a faint, rosy blush spread across Sona's cheeks. He had seen past her logic to the heart of the matter, and had not mocked it, but validated it. He had accepted her mind, and her heart. Later, he gathered them. Rias, Sona, Akano, Zenobia, and Kaneko, who had been a silent, ever-present shadow through all the encounters. He did not bring them to the library or the club room. He brought them to the center of the ruined quad, the place where their old world had ended. You have all come to me tonight, he began, his voice carrying a quiet power that commanded their absolute attention. You have offered me your swords, your hearts, your ambition, your minds. You have offered to join me. But the structures of your world, a peerage, a political marriage, a fealty, they are too small. They are cages, designed for a smaller reality. The time for cages is over. He raised his hand, and the air in front of them shimmered. It did not tear or break. A new space simply bloomed into being. It was a glimpse into a vast, impossible room. The architecture was serene and powerful, carved from the same star-filled stone as his throne in the void. In the center was a single, large, round table, with no head. Signifying equality. I am not forming a peerage. I am not choosing a single queen. I am laying the foundation of a new house. A new faction. One that owes no allegiance to heaven, the underworld. Or Gregory. A sovereign power, built on the principles of merit, truth, and the will to protect this world from the storm that is coming. He looked at each of them in turn, his gaze holding them. Challenging them. I will be its foundation. But a foundation is useless without its pillars. Rias, your ambition will be its fire. Sona, your logic will be its framework. Akano, your balance will be its heart. Zenobia, your conviction will be its sword. His eyes rested on Kaneko, who watched him with wide, knowing golden eyes. And Kaneko, your watchfulness will be its shield. He gestured to the impossible room, to the round table waiting within. This is my offer to you. Not to be my lovers, or my servants. But to be the founding pillars of my house. To stand with me as partners. To abandon the old games and help me build something that can withstand the coming war. He gave them the choice. The ultimate choice. To cling to the world they knew, or to step into the terrifying, exhilarating unknown with him. Kaneko Tuju, the silent observer, the girl of few words, made the first move. She walked forward, her small steps sure and steady, and stood directly beside him, looking into the new room. She then turned her head and gave him a single, small nod. Her trust, given so rarely, was an answer more powerful than any oath. One by one, the others followed, leaving the ruins of the old world behind them and stepping into the promise of the new. They stood with him, not behind him, a circle of disparate, powerful women, united by a single, impossible man. They were no longer just pieces on a board. They were the players of a new game. Chapter 9 End. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.